Her body ached as she stepped carefully among the rubble. Smoke clung to the torn sky above the red keep, an ominous, swirling cloak of ash, dust, and remnants of dragon fire. In her mind's eye, Arya Stark still saw the brilliant flashes of Daenerys' wrath. King's Landing had been drowned in flames. The sweet stench of charred wood and scorched flesh lingered in every breath. Although the fires had begun to die, the city smoldered, as if refusing to forget the dragon's fury. She pressed a corner of her cloak against her mouth and nose, trying to keep from coughing on the thick air, pausing only when her boot crunched on a piece of jagged stone that once was a pillar. She remembered the woman with silver hair, remembered the heat of Drogon's wings beating the air as he soared overhead, spitting death below, and remembered the moment when Daenerys Targaryen's unstoppable rise came crashing into tragedy. One life snuffed out, and the course of history changed again, as it always did in these 7 kingdoms. The city might be battered, but it still breathed, a feeble, sorrowful breath that moaned like a wounded animal. Arya felt no triumph at Daenerys' downfall. The Targaryen queen had been consumed by the anger and fear inside her. But the day was won at a cost too dear to measure. She imagined her father's gentle, firm voice in her memory, as she had so many times. Sometimes there is no glory, even if you are on the winning side. Especially, her father would have added, if the cost is the innocent. She drew in a shallow breath, kept walking. Step by step, through the broken streets of the capital, she saw the stares of those who remained. Some recognized her stark features, that fierce northern cast of her face. Others simply looked on in dazed confusion, unsure of who or what might claim power now. She had overheard Grey Worm barking orders to some unsullied. They still stood guard around the remains of the palace, though their queen was dead. Her killer, Jon Snow, was nowhere to be found, and rumors spread like wildfire that he had either fled or surrendered himself. The truth would come out, as it always did. But for now, King's Landing teetered in a precarious hush, waiting for the next piece of news that would either soothe or crush it. At times, Arya felt as if she walked between worlds. She was no longer the child who followed her father to King's Landing. She was no longer the faceless assassin in training in Bravos, nor the wolf prowling the riverlands seeking vengeance. In these final hours, after witnessing the city's downfall, she was little more than a woman carrying a swirl of questions in her heart. One of them was this: who would rule them now, and was that a good or terrible thing? She thought about Sansa. Her sister was safe in the north, or so Arya assumed, because that had been Sansa's domain. Winterfell, seat of the Starks. She thought of Bran, too, the quiet, all-seeing boy who was now more raven than man. She wondered if the lords and ladies would try to drag him into claiming the throne. Perhaps they would look to another Targaryen heir. Yet the idea of another Targaryen on the throne, so soon after Daenerys' devastation, was unthinkable. Still, the realm had a habit of forging alliances quickly, forgetting the pains of the present to plan for tomorrow's comforts. But was there truly any Targaryen left, besides Jon, who had Targaryen blood in him? For a fleeting moment, a bitter smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. It was all nonsense. The throne was a poisonous seat. She had seen how it ruined those who claimed it. It had devoured the best intentions of each occupant. And yet, somehow, men and women still clawed for a chance to place themselves upon it. Stumbling over a fallen timber, Arya paused to look back at the remains of the Red Keep. The building rose in half-broken spires, its once proud silhouette jagged and incomplete against the dimming sky. Smoke drifted from the top. Even inside the castle, small pockets of flame might still be fighting for life, swirling in black corridors that had caved in. The city, the keep, the realm, everything was at a tipping point. She felt it. Something new would be forced to rise from these ashes. She kept walking. There was a subtle shift in the mood around her, though. A hush. Footsteps. She realized she was being followed, perhaps not by a single set of eyes. She tried not to think of the many men and women who had perished in the rubble. The idea that some group might be preying on the survivors made her hand move reflexively to where a needle hung at her side. She tightened her grip around the hilt. It grounded her, gave her a piece of home. Then, as she turned a corner between two half-destroyed stone walls, a figure stepped from behind a collapsed archway. She recognized Sir Davos Seaworth immediately. His stubble, his steady eyes scanning her expression. He looked half exhausted, half determined, all sorrow. "Arya," he said, letting out a breath. "We've been looking for you. The lords are meeting soon, what's left of them at least." She studied him with a guarded look, though deep inside, she respected the Onion Knight. "Is Jon with them?" she asked quietly. Davos shook his head. "I haven't seen Jon." The Unsullied took him in. "I believe they've locked him up, for fear he'll flee the city after what happened." Arya's lips pressed into a thin line. "He did what he had to do," she said. Even though it wasn't her place to judge or absolve him, she still believed Jon had ended Daenerys' reign of terror before it truly began. "I know," Davos said quietly. His eyes flicked from her boots to her face. "And I suspect many of the others will know too. They're trying to find a way forward without creating another war. Grey Worm is furious, but he also has no leader. The Dothraki aren't sure who to take orders from, if they're taking orders at all." Arya gave a small nod, turning her gaze to the broken city around them. In the hush that followed, a man's cry echoed from far off. Perhaps a survivor calling for help amid the carnage. Somewhere, a horse neighed in distress. "So who's in charge?" she asked. Davos sighed. "No one yet. The lords from the Reach, the Vale, the Stormlands, anyone who can come swiftly, are gathering to talk. Tyrion was found in the rubble. Is alive. But they locked him up for treason against Daenerys. We'll see if he's brought out to speak." He looked at Arya carefully, as though considering what she might think of all this. "Will you come?" She had no illusions that her presence would decide anything. A part of her wanted to vanish, to cut through the dark corners of King's Landing, avoid any more illusions of grandeur, and sail far away as she had planned. But these were her people too, in a sense, even if she did not consider herself a lady. "Yes," she said at last. "I'll come." They made their way past the blackened remains of houses, occasionally passing small groups of survivors huddled around a meager fire. No one seemed to have enough food or clean water. The shock of Daenerys' attack left the city in a stunned silence. Even as they neared the Red Keep's courtyard, an open area mostly free of the worst of the rubble, the few people they passed hardly raised their heads to look at her or Davos. It was as though grief itself had weighed them down. In the courtyard, where the dragon's skull once rested below and deeper inside the keep, they found a makeshift circle of chairs and benches. Highborn and lesser lords alike gathered in a cluster, some with cuts and bruises from the siege, some wearing fresh clothing that must have been looted or found in the remains of the city. The sense of precarious calm was immediate. So many eyes, familiar and not, turned toward Arya Stark as she stepped forward. She recognized Edmure Tully, her uncle, alive and rummaging for dignity in that circle. Gendry was there too, wearing a deep frown, arms crossed over a thick leather vest. Bran Stark sat quietly in a wheeled chair, expression distant but attentive. Beside him stood a few lords of the Vale, muttering among themselves. Brienne of Tarth was there as well, tall and resolute, though her face carried sorrow's weight. Arya saw how the discussion was already growing heated. Men from Dorne, from the Stormlands, from the Iron Islands. Their words flared up, colliding in the warm air, rising like sparks off a dying flame. The question was the same from each corner. Who would rule us? How will we pick up the pieces? She felt an unease settle in the pit of her stomach. This was the very last place she wanted to be. But Davos gently guided her closer, until she stood at the fringes of the circle. She became aware of more eyes drifting her way. A hush spread, as if an invisible breath swept across them all. Then Gendry took a step forward, clearing his throat. "You made it," he said softly, looking at Arya. His voice carried both relief and concern. She nodded. "Still alive?" He gave a small nod in return. There was something in his gaze that hinted at more unspoken words. Feelings, perhaps. But there was no time for that here. Brienne lifted her chin. "We were discussing who should lead the kingdoms," she said quietly. The tall knight's voice was calm, but behind her words, the tension was palpable. They're deciding the fate of Jon Snow as well. Arya's pulse quickened. Jon Snow. So he was imprisoned somewhere close by, in the depths of the keep, or a tower cell. She had half a mind to march away from the circle to set him free. Yet she forced herself to stay. What did they propose to do with him? No one answered immediately. It was Gendry who ventured. Grey Worm demands he pay for Daenerys' death. But the lords won't simply hand him over. They say it would spark another war if they executed Jon. He's too loved, especially in the north. Nen Sonde. Arya's gut twisted at the thought of war. So many had died already. How many times would they plunge into the same cycle? Her eyes flicked to the assembled lords. "What about Sansa?" she asked. One of the Vale Lords spoke up, voice trembling slightly, as if in awe or fear. "Lady Sansa has declared the North free and independent. She won't descend upon King's Landing and place her head on a chopping block. The North will not kneel anymore. Her words are unyielding as the land she rules." "Died?" Arya felt both admiration and a touch of longing for her sister. Yes, that was Sansa, fierce in her convictions, no longer the naive girl who once dreamed of princesses and knights. She wanted the North safe, away from the tangles of southern politics. Arya couldn't blame her. "And what's left for the rest of the realm?" Arya asked quietly. "Will you fight each other for the throne?" "That's what's always happened, hasn't it?" A few men exchanged glances. Edmure Tully opened his mouth as if to speak. Then, from a cluster of guards near the edge of the courtyard, a commotion. Two unsullied stoic behind their spears shoved Tyrion Lannister forward. He was disheveled. Dirt smudged on his face. Hair matted. His clothes were fraying at the edges. The fine fabric scuffed from days in a cell. Yet his eyes still glimmered with that cunning intelligence. The guards halted him in the center of the circle. He looked around at the assembled lords and ladies, then noticed Arya. He gave the barest of nods. "Well," he said, his voice ragged but still brimming with an undercurrent of wit. "I see we're all quite cheerful this morning." A hush fell. Then slowly, as if drawn out by the tension, Tyrion began to speak. He acknowledged the state of the city, the people's suffering. He apologized for his part in raising Daenerys to unchallenged power, for believing she could bring peace. He explained, in halting words, how she had become a tyrant in the end, how it was inevitable that someone would try to stop her, how, though it pained him, he was not blind to his own guilt. Nobody interrupted. Perhaps they were too exhausted to muster the usual vitriol. Or perhaps they understood that blame could be cast on many shoulders. When Tyrion finished, he looked at the crowd, almost waiting for a reaction. One of the Stormlords spoke up, clearing his throat. "You propose a new king or queen," he said. "You want us to pick again? After all we've been through?" "It's the only way," Tyrion answered. "Without a ruler, we descend into warlords and chaos. So many claimants, so many old grudges. One spark, and the realm goes up in flames again." His eyes flicked over to Arya for a moment. "We need someone who doesn't lust for power but might have sense enough to lead." A murmur rippled through the group. A few looked around, waiting for someone else to volunteer. Edmure Tully awkwardly started to speak again, as he had once before, but Tyrion gave him that pointed look, and he sat back. Gendry frowned, glancing at Arya, but he said nothing. Then from behind her came Bran's soft voice. "Sometimes the best ruler is the one who wants it least." Arya turned to him. She expected him to say more, perhaps to declare something about how stories live on, how the realm needs a blank slate. But Bran was silent. His head tilted slightly, as if he peered at some invisible tapestry of time. She remembered that he had told her he could never be Lord of Winterfell. He was something else, something more distant. A wave of unease coursed through her. The lords debated among themselves. Names floated in the air. Gendry Baratheon, legitimized by Daenerys. Tyrion Lannister, though he was still a prisoner of sorts. Yara Greyjoy, who had claimed independence for the Iron Islands. Even Ser Davos was mentioned in passing. though he looked horrified at the idea. And then, from one side, a voice rose in a hush. "What about Arya Stark?" Silence fell across the courtyard. Arya felt her breath catch in her throat. Her first instinct was to dismiss the notion outright. She was not a lady. She was hardly a Stark, in so many ways, not the same girl who had left Winterfell so long ago. What right did she have to rule? None, she wanted to say. But eyes turned to her. "She's a Stark," said the old lord from the Vale. "Her sister Sansa rules the north, and she's proven herself wise. Arya is as much her father's daughter as Sansa is. But Sansa will not kneel. Arya, on the other hand, might remain connected to the north while also bridging the rest of the realm. If the north is set on its independence, perhaps we can keep the realms at peace by crowning someone with northern blood but a willingness to stand for the rest of us. She has proven her bravery, her loyal." Arya felt the weight of her father's name all over again. Ned Stark had always told her that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, that a ruler must face the consequences of their decisions. She had tried to live by his teachings in her own way. But to take the throne, it felt impossible. She wanted to refuse. The only desire she ever truly held was to wander free, to see the far ends of the world that the maps barely touched. She had wanted no part in politics, in fancy dresses, in supplicants kneeling at her feet. Still, the whisper lingered in the silence. "Arya Stark. Arya Stark. Aye." Her voice faltered. She cleared her throat, trying to speak with more conviction, though her heart hammered. "I'm not meant to sit on a throne. I'm no queen. I'm not even sure I'm a lady." A hush. Tyrion studied her, measuring her reaction. He seemed almost expectant, like he'd predicted this. "You've traveled the world," he said, voice thoughtful. "You've met death in the eyes. You've seen rulers rise and fall, had the chance to take power for yourself in many ways and never did. That is precisely why the realm might trust you." "Now." She shook her head, feeling her cheeks burn, though it was hardly an emotion akin to embarrassment. More like anger or panic, that they would place this burden on her shoulders. "It makes no sense," she said. "Let the realm choose someone else. I have no desire for the Iron Throne. It's burned to half its shape anyway, if it's even still standing." She thought bitterly of how Drogon's fire had melted and twisted that seat of swords. A rustle of movement sounded. Bran's voice drifted from behind her once more, quiet yet unwavering. "This is no time to let old ways hold us captive. The realm is fragile. Jon has Targaryen blood, but half the realm hates the Targaryens now. Sansa will not kneel. But there must be a link between North and South, or we condemn ourselves to a future of infinite wars and breakings." His pale eyes settled on Arya, though they seemed distant, gazing beyond her. "You've seen how people suffer, what the cost of power can be. You'd protect them." Something swelled in Arya's chest. Fear, desperation, perhaps a flicker of longing. How many times had she thought that everything would be better if the realm had decent leaders like her father? Or maybe like Robb had tried to be. But she was not them. She had no illusions of grandeur. She was a killer, a wandering ghost who'd slipped in and out of the shadows. Could that be a queen? The group resumed debate around them, tensions rising and falling with each exchange. Yara Greyjoy claimed that the Iron Islands had suffered enough under the old monarchy, but she would consider bending the knee only to someone she deemed honorable. Dorne's representative, a quiet but stern-faced man, insisted that if the new ruler would allow Dorne to remain mostly independent in governance, they would follow. The Stormlands wanted a strong figure who could rebuild the capital, or at least provide some semblance of order and food to the starving. The Vale demanded stability and safe roads for trade. Amid all the demands and barbed words, Arya felt a tide pulling her in a direction she never thought to walk. The lords did not trust Tyrion alone, nor did they trust Gendry, still so young to the ways of ruling. Edmure Tully, though older, had proven incompetent as a leader on more than one occasion, and no one would dare put forward a Lannister after the horrors that had led them here. Meanwhile, the Targaryen claim was overshadowed by Daenerys' final rampage. So they looked at Arya. More and more it was as if she had become the last thread connecting them all. A Stark, but not the ruling Stark of the North, a hero, rumored to have slain the Night King but not thirsting for the crown. Perhaps that was the point. She tried to speak again, to muster a resolute refusal. Her lips parted, but the words never came. She thought of the orphans wandering these shattered streets, the mothers who had lost their children in dragonfire, the wounded who had no coin for the maesters. She thought of how many times she had encountered starving peasants on her travels through the riverlands, how many times she'd heard them curse the name of whatever king or queen sat the throne while they died in the mud. Why they died in the mud. And in that silence, she felt a pang. If she turned away now, who would rise in her stead? Fate had guided her hand when she slew the Night King. She had never planned to be the hero. She was just a girl who wouldn't die. Now fate might be guiding her again. Or was it simple chance? Tyrion drew her from her thoughts, lifting his bound hands a little. The city needs someone to look up to, or at least someone they can trust not to burn it down. The Seven Kingdoms, what remains of them, need that. If you truly do not want it, that is perhaps the best reason you should have it. A quiet hush. Then Arya made her decision, if only for the moment. I won't say yes, she said, voice tight. Not until I've seen what remains. Not until I've walked these streets. Spoken to the people still alive here. I need to see that I can do some good. If the realm wants to crown me in time, so be it. Her eyes hardened. But only if it's truly the best course. I won't sit a throne only to watch more suffering. The lords looked about, uncertain. But they could not force her to accept if she refused. And no other contender rose to capture the crowd's support. In the end, a fragile agreement settled on them. The armies would stand down. Jon Snow's fate would be decided once a new ruler was confirmed. For now, Grey Worm and the Unsullied would keep him imprisoned, though in decent conditions, with no harm to come to him. When the gathering broke apart, the courtyard seemed to exhale in relief. The sun had begun its slow descent. Arya stood alone for a moment, letting the breeze brush her face, tasting the ash that clung to the air. She had lived through so many transformations, so many near deaths, that she struggled to reconcile who she was with who the realm wanted her to be. One part of her wanted to vanish, to continue her journey across the sea. Another part of her recognized that turning her back might curse the land into yet another spiral of bloodshed. She could almost hear her father's voice. When the snows fall and the white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. And she was never truly alone, was she? She heard someone approach. She turned to see Gendry standing there, arms crossed. He watched her with an unreadable expression. Arya, he said softly, they really want you to do this. She let out a slow breath. I know. I'm not sure I'll give them what they want. He hesitated. If you do, I just want you to know I'll support you. Whatever that means. I'm Lord of Storm's End now, and I never asked for that either. But sometimes we don't choose the path before us. We just walk it. He seemed to consider something, then gently reached for her hand. Their fingers brushed, calloused from weapons, forging, and countless journeys. I know you, though. You'll find a way to do what's right. She felt a pang in her chest, a memory of the last time he'd confessed his affection for her. He had offered her a comfortable life, a place as a lady of Storm's End. She refused then. Could she refuse again? Was it even the same question anymore? Thank you, she said quietly, pulling her hand away. I still don't know if I can sit there, be someone's queen. It feels wrong. Gendry nodded, sadness flickering in his eyes. Yes, but you wouldn't be just anyone's queen. You'd be the queen the realm needs, if that's truly what you decide. Arya didn't answer. Her mind drifted to all she had seen. The chaos of King's Landing, the twisted lumps of iron that might have been the throne, the broken spires of the Red Keep. In the swirl of memories, she saw the faces of those she'd loved and lost. Her father Robb, her mother, her direwolf Nymeria running free in the wilderness. All the ghosts that followed her. Slowly, the courtyard emptied until only a few guards and onlookers remained. In the following days, she did as she had promised. She ventured from street to street, stepping around collapsed buildings and makeshift funeral pyres. She saw small pockets of relief efforts run by the faith. The sparing few septas and septons, trying to give the dead a proper farewell. Some recognized her, called her "My Lady." She gritted her teeth at the term, but did not refute it. Others with hollow cheeks and watery eyes approached her for help, or simply stared at her as if expecting a miracle. She was no miracle worker. She had always been a killer, a traveler, a phantom of the Old North. Yet she found herself speaking gently, urging them to wait, to let the lords find a solution. She offered a comforting hand where she could. Time after time, she saw the destruction, the hopelessness. She had thought the War of the Five Kings was bad, but this was different. This was devastation that seemed to drag the spirit of the city into the mud. Sometimes at night, she would slip away, find a quiet corner to close her eyes. In those moments, she felt the weight pressing on her, as though the realm itself were calling to her. She wanted to push it away, but the sorrow around her carved cracks in her resistance. If a throne, a crown, the burden of leadership, if all of that could spare some child from the horror she saw, could she ignore it? A week passed, perhaps more. During that time, Grey Worm's anger simmered on the edges. The Unsullied, leaderless in many ways, still kept discipline. They stationed themselves near the ports, took rations from what was left of the granaries. Yet they made no move to slaughter or rampage. They waited for a resolution, just as everyone else did. The Dothraki, fewer now, had begun to depart in small bands, drifting back to the open plains outside the city. No one was sure if they intended to stay in Westeros or sail for Essos again. The tension was a coiled snake, ready to strike if the council failed. Tyrion, released into guarded watch rather than a cell, tried to encourage Arya. He would speak with her in hushed tones, listing the reasons she might do well on the throne, praising her sharp mind, her moral compass. She felt annoyance but also recognized that Tyrion spoke not from a place of vanity, but from a genuine desire to salvage the realm. He had gambled and lost before. Now he saw a chance to restore at least some stability. The lords, too, occasionally approached her, pressing for her acceptance. Each day, she remained non-committal. Then word came that Jon Snow was growing weaker in his cell. He was not mistreated, but the strain of guilt and the uncertainty of his fate gnawed at him. Arya decided to see him. She found her way into the keep's battered corridors, accompanied by Brienne, who had insisted on a measure of security. 2 Unsullied guarded the cell. At Arya's request, they let her in, though they watched her with cautious eyes. Jon sat on a rough bench, his hands clasped before him, forearms resting on his knees. He looked up as she entered, and a flicker of relief passed over his features. "Arya," he breathed, standing. She rushed forward and embraced him. For a moment, they were just 2 Starks in the gloom of a broken world. Then she stepped back, studying his face. He looked thinner, eyes shadowed by fatigue. "Have they treated you well?" she asked quietly. "Well enough," he replied. "Better than most could expect, I suppose." His gaze flicked to the corridor beyond her. "What's happening out there?" She took a breath. "They want to crown me," she said, her tone carefully neutral. She wanted to see his reaction. He stared. "You?" His voice was soft, not disbelieving in a cruel sense, but stunned. "But you never—" "I know," Arya said, cutting him off gently. "I never wanted any of this, but the city is torn. The lords fear another war. They think a Stark might unite the realm, or what remains of it, while still respecting the North's independence. They're afraid of placing you on the throne because of your Targaryen blood. The Unsullied want your head if they can't have Daenerys back from the grave." She paused, feeling her throat tighten at the memory of the raging queen's downfall. "No one else seems to fit." Jon reached for her hand, a brotherly warmth. "You'd be a good queen," he said, though his voice held sorrow. "Better than most. But are you sure you want that burden? Our father never sought power. He only accepted responsibilities because he believed it was his duty. And look what it cost him." Arya's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I've been thinking about that too, every day." She clenched her jaw. "I don't want it, Jon. But I see the people in the streets, the children with no parents, the broken families. If I can prevent one more war, If I can spare them from some tyrant, I might have to accept. I might not be the best choice, but maybe that's why I'm the only choice. Dean. He ran a hand through his dark hair. They still want me dead? Some do, some don't. The realm is split. You killed their queen, but you may have saved the realm from her dragons. I suspect they'll look to their new ruler for the final decision. She squeezed his hand. If I do it, I'll make sure you're safe. But it'll mean we might not see each other as we once did. More. John closed his eyes, exhaling, as though the weight of it all pressed upon his lungs. I understand, he said. I'm sorry. I never wanted this for you. He paused, gazing at her with mingled pride and sadness. You do what's right. You always have. She nodded, letting go of his hand. The Unsullied stirred outside the door, their patience waning. Arya made a small promise to herself that if she became queen, one of her first acts would be to free Jon, to let him decide his own path. She offered him a final nod before stepping out, the iron door closing with a dull echo behind her. Time, it seemed, was running short. Tensions with the Iron Islands grew again, as Yara threatened to leave the alliance if no leader was chosen soon. Dorne, restless in the south, waited. Letters arrived from Sansa, all but confirming she had no intention of bending the knee to any southern ruler. Yet she offered Arya her blessing, in her quiet and formal tone, if that was truly Arya's path. When Arya read that letter, her heart caught. Her sister's words were supportive yet resolute. The North is free, but if my sister sits that throne, we shall be allies in all but name. Another meeting in the courtyard was called. This time, the lords and ladies seemed even more anxious, as if they could sense the realm's future hinged on one decision. Arya stood at the center, next to Bran, who remained quiet but watchful. Davos, Gendry, Brienne, Edmure, Yara, the representatives from the Vale, from the Reach, from Dorne. All of them formed a ragged circle once more. Tyrion, no longer bound, stepped forward to address them. We have lost much. Too many dead to count. The city is in ruins, half-starved. The other kingdoms grow impatient. We need a leader to end this chaos. And so we ask again, who among us can bind the wounds of this realm? Who will it be? A hush. Some eyes flicked to Arya Stark. Others lingered on Gendry, on Yara, but eventually, the gaze circled back to Arya Stark. Finally, with her heart pounding in her ears, Arya spoke. I never asked to rule, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I never wanted crowns or titles, but I'm a Stark of Winterfell. I've walked across this kingdom and beyond. I've seen the suffering of people under poor rulers, and I won't stand by and watch another war take shape if I can stop it. A subtle murmur. She pressed on, her eyes scanning the assembly. If I take this burden, I swear not to be a tyrant. I swear no more burning cities, no more innocent blood for the sake of a single person's ambition. We will rebuild King's Landing, feed its people, and restore what we can. If I fail in that duty, I expect you to rise up and cast me down. Because a queen who does not protect her people is no queen at all. Bow. She took a breath. And in that moment, she saw something shift in their faces. A flicker of hope, or at least a momentary relief that someone was stepping forward. Someone they believed might not lead them to ruin. A hush settled. She heard crows caw overhead, circling the scorched rooftops. Tyrion nodded, then turned to the assembly, voice ringing out. All those who believe that Arya Stark, of the House Stark, shall be our new ruler. Speak now. Yara Greyjoy stepped forward, looking at Arya with a level gaze. I've seen your worth, Stark. You saved us all from the undead when no one else could. You're no stranger to a fight, and you speak plainly. That I respect. I will bend the knee, so long as the Iron Islands keep certain rights to rule ourselves. We will follow your lead, as you said. Lord Davos bowed, hand pressed to his heart. Your father was an honorable man. I believe you'll do what's right. You have my support. One by one, the lords offered their pledges. Dorne was reserved, but eventually, they gave a curt nod, acknowledging that they would follow if she guaranteed peace and recognized their traditions. Gendry knelt without hesitation. Brienne dipped her head solemnly. Edmure Tully tried to say something grand, but it came out awkward, so he simply bowed his acceptance. Brannon offered Arya a small, inscrutable smile. She looked over the crowd. The moment was surreal, like a dream. She thought of the little girl she had been, chasing cats in the Red Keep, hating the entire notion of being a lady. Now, she stood on the cusp of being queen. Tyrion's voice once more. Then, it is decided. Arya Stark shall reign as queen over the 6 kingdoms, since the north is free under Queen Sansa. From this day until her last day. He turned to her, lowered himself on one knee, as did so many others in the circle. Arya's breath trembled. She looked around at the kneeling figures. The hush was absolute, broken only by the distant crackle of a dying fire. She saw the shape of the ruin that was once the Iron Throne behind them, half melted and jagged. In that instant, she knew she would not rule from that twisted piece of metal. She would find another seat, something that did not symbolize centuries of bloodshed. But that was a problem for another day. For now, this was enough. They had chosen her. She had accepted. As they rose, there was a flurry of movements. Quiet talk among themselves. Discussions of ceremony, of how to proceed. Tyrion glanced at her. "Your Grace," he said, voice tinged with both respect and the faint echo of humor. "We have much to do. The city is still in shambles. Jon Snow is imprisoned. Grey Worm is waiting for an answer, and the lords will be clamoring for your next decree." She felt both a surge of panic and a surprising calm. "My first decree is that Jon Snow shall be released," she said firmly. "He did what he did to stop a tyrant. I will speak with Grey Worm. We will negotiate an end to this cycle of revenge." Tyrion nodded, relieved. A wise choice. Arya gave him a faint smile, though her stomach churned with the enormity of it all. She had no illusions. Taking power would mean endless demands, countless judgments. She remembered how Daenerys once claimed she wanted to break the wheel, yet she ended by fueling it with more blood. Could Arya truly do better? She did not know, but she would try. She stepped away from the group, letting them sink into hurried discussions of logistics. Brienne followed close behind, as did Gendry. Davos lingered to speak with Tyrion. As Arya made her way across the courtyard, she caught Bran's eye, and for a moment, they exchanged a silent look. She did not know what he saw in his visions, but she sensed he approved of this path. His acceptance calmed her more than any vow from the lords. She passed the melted throne in a wide arc, refusing to linger by that symbol of so many heartbreaks. She gazed instead at the city beyond, at the setting sun reflecting off shards of glass in the ruined towers. Somehow, she would have to mend these wounds. The realm was not a single thing. It was lords, ladies, small folk, fishermen, blacksmiths, septons, children. They were broken, battered by war, and starved of hope. Now they looked to her, the girl who once had no name, the wolf who prowled the darkness to protect them. It would not be easy. It might even break her in time. But she had learned to face her fears, to strike swiftly when needed, to show mercy when possible. If that was what the realm needed, someone to stand between them and the darkness, she would rise to that duty. She thought of Nymeria, somewhere in the forests of the Riverlands, leading her own pack. That was Arya's nature too, to lead, if she must, those who had no one else. A breeze caught her hair, lifting stray brown locks across her face. She closed her eyes, feeling the tingle of possibility. Tomorrow, she would negotiate with Grey Worm, secure Jon's freedom, begin the arduous process of feeding a war-torn city, and attempt to restore stability. One day, she would have to broker peace among the fractious lords. She would have to navigate alliances, quell rebellions, sign treaties. It would be a life of endless challenges. Yet for all of the burdens, she felt a spark of determination. If she could kill the Night King, she could certainly keep these people alive. The courtyard hummed behind her with the rising tide of voices. Talk of the new queen's coronation. Arya Stark, Queen of the 6 Kingdoms. She hardly recognized the title, but she accepted it now. Perhaps she would not rule from a throne of swords but from the ground among the people, forging a new path for a realm that was desperate for a fresh start. She opened her eyes, gazing at the horizon. The sky blazed with the last colors of sunset, an orange glow fading into purple. For a brief moment, she allowed herself a small, bittersweet smile. This was not the end of her story, it was merely another beginning, as all her journeys had been. She would lead them, protect them, and if the day came when someone more worthy arose, she would pass the mantle willingly. That, she promised herself. Turning on her heel, she strode back to the circle of lords who were still discussing, arguing, planning. She offered Gendry a grateful nod as he approached with a roll of parchment. He explained it was a list of immediate concerns: grain stores, rebuilding efforts, shipments from the Reach. She took the parchment, scanned it. Yes, this was her life now. An endless swirl of duties. She caught Brienne's eye and saw the knight's solemn respect. Brienne would stand at her side, a shield of honor. Arya found comfort in that. The city moaned in the background, the soft lament of a place that had seen too much war. The ground was still warm under her boots from the fires that had raged not long ago. She sensed the echoes of agony in the battered stones. She vowed then that she would do what she must to ensure no more innocents burned. She would not allow the same mistakes to repeat. She was Arya Stark, and this time, the realm would not drown in blood because of its ruler's vanity. She pressed the parchment into the palm of her hand. The shock had passed. The acceptance had settled in, if only just. Now came the labor of a lifetime. But she had faced the god of death, and lived. Perhaps, in the swirl of all that had happened, she was exactly what these broken kingdoms needed. A hand that could guide the realm without craving the power it provided. With that thought firmly in her mind, she cleared her throat, lifted her voice over the din. The lords turned to look at her, new respect in their eyes, a quiet hush falling upon them. "We begin at sunrise," she said. "We have homes to rebuild, stores to gather, people to feed, and then we see to Jon Snow's freedom. Let the rest of the world see that our mercy is stronger than our rage." They bowed their heads in agreement. Outside the courtyard, among the remains of old gates and charred timbers, survivors lifted their eyes. They might have heard the talk of a new queen, though many of them remembered how quickly queens and kings came and went. But for now, hope was enough, and so it began. Arya Stark's rule, born of fire and ash, but guided by the quiet steel of her northern heart. By the flickering torchlight, she stepped into the corridors of the keep, her new retinue trailing behind. But she didn't feel like a queen so much as a woman bearing an unwanted crown. She thought, as she walked, of the names on her list, those she had once sworn to kill, and how that list had guided her life with an iron hand. Now, a different list would shape her days, a list of tasks to rebuild, feed, protect, and heal. It was long, thankless, and demanding. Yet in the end, it felt more worthy than any vengeance she had ever pursued. Tomorrow, the city would wake to a new dawn. Broken, but perhaps not beyond repair. A city that once cowered beneath dragon wings might learn, over time, that a wolf's protection could be kinder. Arya's steps echoed against the stone floor as she made her way toward what was left of her chambers. She imagined the ghosts that haunted these halls, the blood spilled in these corridors. In her mind, she repeated the vow that she would do everything in her power not to add more ghosts to the Red Keep's long memory. She would never be a perfect queen, nor a queen of courtly grace and gentle hands. But in her heart, she would carry the memory of all she'd lost. Her father's honor, her mother's fierce love, her siblings' bond, her own harrowing experiences. Perhaps that was the steel needed to temper the throne, to transform it from a seat of tyranny to something else. Outside, the final rim of sunlight faded, the sky turning to ink. The stars would shine soon, over the battered towers and the lives that struggled below. Arya paused at a window, looking out over the city's silhouette, seeing lanterns flicker where survivors gathered. She took a long, slow breath. This was her domain now, and she would guide it as best she could. Beyond the seas, There might be wonders she would never see. But she told herself that part of her story could wait for another time. For now, she had her duty. Arya Stark was queen, though no one ever expected such a thing. Even herself. Yet in the hush of that moment, she felt a faint stirring of resolve. The realm had gone through fire. Maybe, under her watch, it could be reborn into peace. She closed her eyes, clutching the parchment Gendry had given her. Tomorrow. Everything would begin tomorrow. But tonight, she allowed herself one small flicker of relief. She had survived the long night, the war for the dawn. Now she would usher in a new day. Whether the city would truly accept her, only time could tell. But if the realm needed a protector who did not crave power, then she, Arya of House Stark, would stand unflinching between darkness and the people. So she would remain until her last breath. When she opened her eyes, the stars had emerged, twinkling over the blackened remains of the city. Somewhere far beyond the devastation, the winter snows might still linger, and beyond them, the open seas beckoned. Perhaps in another life she would answer that call. For now, she was here, in this broken capital, forging a tomorrow out of the wreckage of yesterday. She did not smile, but neither did she frown. She only turned from the window, walked into the flickering torchlight, and steeled herself for whatever would come. She rose with the pale hush of dawn, a subtle gray light seeping through the shattered windows of what had once been the Queen's private solar. The room still smelled of soot, and whenever a breeze stirred, ash drifted across the floor in lazy swirls. Arya brushed a strand of hair from her eyes, her thoughts already coalescing around the day's tasks. Outside, the city groaned. Through a gap in the wall, she could see the skeletal remains of rooftops, a tangle of broken spires, and the swirl of dust that signaled laborers already at work clearing rubble. She still felt the weight of last night's decision pressing upon her. She was queen now. The word still felt foreign. Even so, she had always known that morning came no matter what hung heavy in one's heart. In the north, you learned to rise regardless of fear or pain. Winterfell's lessons had never left her. She pulled a simple tunic over her chemise, followed by a dark leather jerkin, much like she'd worn while traveling. She had no taste for the luxurious gowns they had begun to bring her, laid out by well-meaning stewards who thought a queen should look like one. She wanted to move freely, to walk among the people without feeling strangled by fine fabrics. As she stepped through the corridor, 2 guards fell in behind her. They wore no grand livery. The city's resources were too meager to fashion anything new. They simply carried swords and wore battered cuirasses from prior reigns. She caught a glimpse of the men's faces, one older, one younger, neither quite sure how to address her. She could see the question in their eyes. Did they bow? Did they call her, Your Grace? In the hush of dawn, she simply gave them a curt nod and continued on. She did not want ceremony for ceremony's sake. Her first duty was to meet with Tyrion and Davos in a chamber near the main hall. The route took her past scorched tapestries and hallways, still choked with fallen timbers. She noticed more guards posted along the way. Some were unsullied, rigid in formation, while others were knights and soldiers from various houses that had pledged themselves to her rule. It was an uneasy mix by trend. Here and there, she saw frowns, uneasy stances, as if the soldiers distrusted their new allies. At last, she entered a small antechamber, once used for lesser councils. Davos Seaworth stood by the soot-stained hearth, arms folded. Tyrion Lannister was at the lone table, scanning a scroll by the light of a single lantern. Brienne of Tarth waited in the corner, stoic as ever. Gendry too was there, hands braced on the back of a chair. They all looked up when Arya walked in, and each offered their version of a respectful gesture. Davos dipped his head, Tyrion straightened his back. Brienne offered a small bow, and Gendry simply met her gaze. No one wasted words on pageantry. "You're punctual," Tyrion said, though he looked half exhausted. "I've been up most of the night, corresponding with the lords outside the city. We have new letters from the Vale, the Stormlands, and from the Westerlands. Those who still remain loyal to a Lannister name, or who simply want to see how the wind blows. I can imagine how many urgent messages we'll get, Arya replied, her voice low. I want to focus first on the city. Those letters can wait unless they're dire. Tyrion handed her one scroll. This one's from the new Warden of the West. He's requesting a formal audience. My best guess is he wants to pledge his loyalty in exchange for certain benefits, gold shipments, or lowered taxes once we're in a position to tax again. But you're right. We have more immediate concerns. Davos offered a heavy sigh. The city's bread stores are dangerously low. We've had to ration water from the wells. We've no new shipments of grain coming in from the Reach yet, not until the roads are safe again, or until we secure enough coin to pay for it. I'm hoping Sam, the new Tarly Lord, will help us, but that'll take time. No, Sam. Arya listened, aware her own knowledge of supply lines was meager. She remembered scrounging for food in the Riverlands, how scarcity pushed people to cruelty. The roads must be cleared first, she said. We can spare men to patrol them. We'll need to negotiate with the new lords in the Reach to send food. If they delay, more people will starve. That's the gist of it, Your Grace, Tyrion said, rubbing his temples. We'll also need to appoint new officers for City Watch. The gold cloaks were scattered, many killed in Daenerys' assault. Another handful simply fled. So there's no unified watch at the moment. We have half-trained fighters from the Stormlands and the Vale, plus a few from the Crownlands, but they're disorganized. Thieves have already begun to loot what's left in the merchant district. Now, she pressed her lips together. We'll restore order. Some of the soldiers from loyal houses can serve as a temporary watch. Brienne, I need you to make sure they're trained, or at least that there's discipline. Brienne inclined her head. I'll do my best. Though training raw recruits takes time, we do what we can. As for the Unsullied, have we heard from Grey Worm yet? Arya asked. She knew the day's largest hurdle lay with that man. They needed an accord. He demanded retribution for Daenerys' death, but he was no savage. At least, not by nature. He followed discipline, though that discipline had worn thin in the face of his grief. Davos shrugged. He's made no aggressive moves, but he's refused to meet with us so far. The Unsullied stand guard at the docks and the main gates. If we approach, they let us pass so long as we're not armed in large numbers, but they do so with suspicion in their eyes. Arya nodded. It's time I speak to him then. We can't keep Jon locked up forever, and we can't risk an open conflict with the Unsullied. They're too skilled, and there's still enough of them to spill a great deal of blood if they choose. I'd advise taking a small retinue, not an entire guard, Tyrion said. Grey Worm might see a large entourage as a threat. Arya agreed. I'll go with Brienne, and perhaps you, Tyrion. Davos, Gendry, stay here. Coordinate with the others about the roads and see if you can glean anything else about the grain situation. We need relief soon, or this city will rot from within. Density. Gendry's eyes flicked to her. Are you sure you don't want me at your side? I'll be fine, Arya said firmly. We need your presence here. The Stormlands trust you. If Grey Worm sees you, a Baratheon bastard elevated by Daenerys, who knows how he'll react, he might view you as further betrayal. Best keep things simple. Gendry hesitated, then nodded. As you say. Brienne motioned to Arya that she was ready. Tyrion dropped the scrolls onto the table, murmuring to Davos about drafting a few letters requesting immediate shipments of food. The talk of logistics followed Arya out of the chamber. She exhaled quietly, her nerves sharpening as she imagined how the conversation with Grey Worm might go. Once, she might have simply crept in with a dagger in the dark, but she couldn't rely on that now, not as queen. Diplomacy was foreign to her, yet she had to learn quickly. They crossed a charred courtyard where half the walls had crumbled, passing a group of men piling stones into a handcart. The dawn light slanted across them, painting the dusty air gold. Nearby, a woman doled out stale bread to a ragged handful of children, and Arya paused long enough to watch, her heart constricting. Their eyes were wide with hunger, but they still parted for her with a cautious respect. She realized word must have spread. Arya Stark, a queen not in fancy gowns but in worn leathers and a sword at her hip. She forced a small nod of greeting, then carried on. She refused to offer false hope. Until the grain came, there was only so much to go around. They reached the gateway leading out of the Red Keep's perimeter. A few men from the Vale bowed and let them pass. The old city roads lay cracked and littered with rubble. The air reeked of smoke. After Daenerys' attack, entire neighborhoods had become charred husks. Yet among those ruins, the city's heartbeat persisted. Blacksmiths setting up shop in half-burned forges, mothers gathering what possessions they could from scorched homes, small folk carting water in battered buckets. The resilience gave Arya a glimmer of hope that all was not lost. Near the waterfront, they spotted the Unsullied camp. Neat rows of tents lined the quay, though some tents bore scorch marks, remnants of the final battles. Armed sentries stood at intervals, spears upright, eyes forward. Arya approached steadily, ignoring the twinge in her stomach. She had always admired the Unsullied for their discipline, and a small part of her recognized that they must feel anchorless without their queen, furious and unmoored by Daenerys' death. The nearest guard crossed his spear to halt them. Brienne tensed, ready to defend Arya if things turned ugly. Tyrion cleared his throat. "We seek an audience with Grey Worm, commander of the Unsullied. Announce us." For a moment, the guard said nothing. Then, in that clipped common tongue accent so characteristic of the Unsullied, he answered, "Remain here." He turned sharply and marched into the camp, disappearing among the tents. Arya waited, breathing slowly, willing herself not to appear restless. The harbor lay just beyond, gray waters glinting under the early sun. Ships' masts rose like skeletons, many battered or half sunk. A flock of seagulls wheeled overhead, ignoring the tension below as they searched for scraps. Soon, the guard returned, accompanied by two more Unsullied. "Come," he said. "You will not bring steel." His eyes flicked to the sword at Arya's belt. "Weapons, no." Brienne bristled. "Her Grace is the Queen." Arya held up a hand to silence her. The entire realm was in flux, and forcing the Unsullied to honor her position too strictly might provoke them. She unclasped Needle's scabbard, then handed it carefully to Brienne. Brienne, after a quick look at Arya, removed her own sword belt as well, though her reluctance was obvious. Tyrion raised his hands in a show that he carried no weapon. The guards studied them, apparently satisfied, then turned and led the way. They wound through the rows of tents, the stale smell of sweat and old cooking fires lingering on the damp sea breeze. The Unsullied they passed watched silently. There were no catcalls or curses, only that quiet intensity. Arya caught glimpses of well-maintained spears, shield racks, disciplined lines. This was an army still poised for battle if called upon. Finally, they arrived at a larger tent near the wharf, a standard above it, still bearing the three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. That banner looked worn, as if the past days had drained it of its meaning. Inside, Grey Worm stood over a map spread on a small table. He wore his familiar leather armor, though the edges looked scuffed. The sigil of the dragon burned away in places. His face remained impassive, but Arya sensed the darkness beneath. When they entered, he glanced at them, eyes lingering on Arya, as though trying to decide if he should address her as queen or foe. Tyrion began in a measured tone. "Commander, thank you for agreeing to see us." Grey Worm's gaze flicked to Tyrion, expression rigid. "You speak for the woman who sits in the place of my queen, who murdered my queen. Why should I listen?" Arya's voice came before Tyrion could reply. "Because we want peace, not another slaughter," she said plainly. "You have men. We have men. This city has suffered enough. We must find a way forward that doesn't involve more blood in the streets." Now, for a moment, Grey Worm's jaw tensed. Arya recalled how he had loved Daenerys, how he had believed in her vision of a broken wheel, and in the final days, how that vision turned to ashes. "Your brother killed her," he said flatly, voice low. "He lies in a cell, breathing still. That is not justice." Arya forced herself to remain calm. She wanted to say it had to be done, but that would be salt in a raw wound. He did what he believed was necessary to spare the city. He's my brother, yes, but I also know him. Jon Snow didn't want power or praise. He wanted to save lives. Now run the pair. Grey Worm's lips parted, but instead of scorn, a faint tremor passed over his features, as if the memory of Missandei's death and Daenerys' final rampage haunted him. My queen promised us a new world. We bled for her. And now you stand in her place. He stared at Arya. A new queen, again. Tyrion stepped forward. She destroyed King's Landing in her wrath. She burned men, women, and children alive. Jon Snow put an end to her reign because no one else could. We regret the pain it caused, but continuing to kill each other won't bring her back. It will only ensure more innocents suffer. Nonin? Grey Worm's eyes roved from Tyrion to Arya, then to Brienne. At last, he said, the Unsullied have no queen now, but we do not take orders from you. Arya took a half-step forward. I won't order you to do anything. I'm asking that we coexist. You're free to remain or leave as you see fit. Take ships, sail to Endive as Missandei wished for you, or anywhere you choose. The violence can end here, if you allow it. Hence. He regarded her, weighing the sincerity of her words. And your brother's life? He asked, voice grim. Arya swallowed. If you want your vengeance, then we're at an impasse. There will be more blood. But if you're willing to accept that Daenerys was lost in her grief and madness, that Jon Snow acted to save thousands, then I'm prepared to give you gold for ships, a formal pardon, supplies to rebuild your lives. You're still warriors without a home, but we can help you find one. All I ask is that you free Jon. Neshawar. Grey Worm was silent for a heartbeat that felt like an eternity. Outside the tent, the water lapped at the quay, and gulls screeched overhead. Daenerys Stormborn was my queen, he said, voice tight. But she's gone, and I cannot remake the world she promised. He straightened, setting his jaw. I want no gold from you. The Unsullied will leave this city once we have ships enough to carry us. We will not stay here as your subjects. We will not fight for you. Arya inclined her head. Then we'll see to it you have those ships. What of Jon Snow? Will you insist he pay with his life? Grey Worm's nostrils flared. Her blood is on his hands, but if you truly offer us safe passage away from these lands, if you promise not to hunt us or betray us, then I will grant you your brother's freedom. His voice wavered, anger bleeding into exhaustion. We have lost too much. I will not lose more men in fruitless vengeance. Tyrion exhaled in relief, though he kept his composure. Then we have an accord. Grey Worm gave a short nod. We need enough ships for 8,000 Unsullied, and our provisions, and safe harbor in any port we must pass. We shall never bend the knee to another monarch. Once we depart, our debt is repaid. Vanish. Arya felt an unexpected surge of gratitude. It was not a perfect resolution. She wished the Unsullied could stay and integrate, help rebuild, but she understood their pain. They were done with Westerosi politics, done with crowns. Agreed, she said softly. We'll see that the ships are prepared. Give us time to gather the resources. I promise no harm will come to you while you remain in the city, so long as you do not harm others. Grey Worm's gaze flickered, a subdued acceptance. Then Jon Snow will be released into your custody. If you betray us, we will have our vengeance. A quiet hush fell. Then Arya inclined her head once more. We won't betray you. So it was done. They left the tent shortly after, returning through the rows of Unsullied. The tension was still there, but the men parted, letting Arya and her companions pass without incident. Once out of earshot, Tyrion let out a ragged breath. That went better than I expected. Brienne's posture remained alert. They may still turn on us if they think we're going back on the deal. Arya nodded. We won't. If they want to depart these shores, let them. They served Daenerys well, but now their war is done. Done. The walk back through King's Landing was heavier somehow. The streets were beginning to come alive with the rummaging of people scavenging for remnants. A group of children played in a small courtyard with a chipped wooden wheel, trying to roll it across the cobbles. Their laughter was a bright sound in the gloom, though it stopped as soon as they noticed Arya's party. She gave them a slight nod, trying to appear approachable, but they merely stood there, wide-eyed, until she vanished around the next bend. When they arrived at the Red Keep again, the guards waved them in with relief. Word had spread quickly among the soldiers that the Unsullied would not be launching an assault. They seemed eager to hear how the negotiations had gone. Arya said little, only that Grey Worm had agreed to let Jon go. She saw glimpses of quiet celebration among the men. Jon Snow was well liked by many. As queen, Arya realized that her decisions could bring relief or heartbreak with a single utterance. She forced a small, tight smile, hoping she was doing the right thing. They passed into the keep's lower halls, musty corridors lit by torches, and the occasional crack of daylight through a missing stone. At the base of one tower, 2 of Arya's northern guards stood watch. They saluted briskly when they saw her. Inside the tower was Jon's cell, though Colonnita's cell was generous. It was more of a repurposed storeroom with a barred door. Arya approached and signaled for the guards to unlock it. Inside, Jon sat on a rickety bench. The dim torchlight cast shadows across his features. He stood immediately as Arya stepped in, his eyes searching her face. "Arya," he said, voice edged with uncertainty. "You're all right." She nodded. "I'm fine. Grey Worm has agreed to let you go. You're free." He seemed stunned at first, then relief washed over him. "So the war is truly over. They won't come after us." She raised a shoulder. "They'll leave once we provide ships. As far as we're concerned, the fighting ends here." She hesitated and added softly, "You're pardoned if that means anything. As queen, I can't sentence you for killing Daenerys. Nor would I wish to." He was silent for a moment, grappling with the reality of it. Then he breathed. "Thank you." She motioned him out, leading him from the gloom of his cell into the corridor. His face looked drawn. Yet there was a spark in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Tyrion lingered in the background, giving Jon a slight nod. The tension between them was palpable, given Tyrion's part in pushing Jon toward confronting Daenerys. But no words were spoken of it now. They emerged into the courtyard, where the light was clearer. Jon squinted up at the sun, lifting a hand to shield his eyes. "The city," he murmured, seeing the wreckage anew. "What will happen next?" Arya glanced around. Work crews had begun clearing debris in one corner, stacking broken stones in rough piles. A donkey brayed somewhere near the stables. "I have to rebuild," Arya said. "Or at least begin the process. The lords who pledged to me expect me to restore order, feed the people, ensure there's no second wave of chaos." "Niladrani." Jon's gaze shifted to her face, searching. "And you? Do you truly want this?" She smiled sadly. "Want it? No. But I'll see it done." She paused, lowering her voice so only Jon could hear. "You could go north, if you want. Sansa would welcome you at Winterfell. Or perhaps you'll find another path. You're free to choose." His brow furrowed with old conflicts. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to see the wall again, but I also..." He broke off, shaking his head. "I feel I've lived too many lives. For now, I'll stay here, if you allow it. Help in whatever small way I can. Once the city is on stable ground, perhaps then I'll decide." "Stay as long as you wish," Arya said. "I'd be grateful to have you near." She led him into the main keep, pointing out that he could take any chamber that hadn't been utterly destroyed. Most had rubble or scorch marks, but some offered at least 4 walls and a half-intact roof. Then she guided him to the library, once proud and full of ancient tomes, now partially burned. Piles of singed books lay scattered. Maesters and scribes had arrived from the citadel, trying to preserve what remained. Jon stood among the gutted shelves, a sadness on his face. Arya recognized it as the same sadness she felt each time she passed a new ruin. So much had been lost. Yet in the corner, a silver-haired maester carefully re-inked a copy of a singed volume, determined to salvage knowledge from the ashes. That small resilience was heartening. They parted ways briefly, Jon retreating to clean himself up. Perhaps to find new clothes, Arya moved on to meet with Davos. The Onion Knight stood outside the main hall, where half a dozen men from the Vale were assembling a wooden structure to shore up the battered walls. Davos wore a frown. "We've got 1,000 different tasks, and not enough men or coin to do 1/10 of them," he lamented. "But at least we've had some word from the Reach. They're sending a partial shipment of grain, enough to keep the city from outright starvation for a few weeks." "That's something," Arya said. "What about the roads?" He gestured to a map pinned to a makeshift board. "I've assigned men to clear the King's Road. We're short on laborers, but with some help from the Stormlands and the Vale, we might manage. Still, it'll be slow going." "Nader." She studied the map. But the roads fanned out from King's Landing like spokes on a wheel. She knew an unguarded road was a breeding ground for bandits. "Have any lords from the Crownlands stepped forward to help?" Davos snorted. "Most of them are either dead or fled during the siege. The few that remain have ragged forces and can barely feed their own people. Will rely heavily on other regions for now. Of course, none of them want to send food or manpower without a promise of future reward." "Enter." Arya thought of the worn phrase, "Winter is coming." But winter was always a threat in the north. Down here, the threat was famine, disease, or simply the next war. "We can't promise them gold we don't have. We can promise them trade and security once the city is functional again." She paused, tapping her fingers on the board. "Any news of potential hostilities from across the narrow sea?" "Not yet," Davos said. "Word of Daenerys' fall must have reached them, but Essos is in constant turmoil. I doubt they'll intervene in our troubles unless there's profit to be made. Right now, we're not exactly a wealthy or stable realm to exploit." "Daenerys," she nodded grimly. "A small mercy that. We'll keep watch anyway. The city can't handle another invasion. For now, let's focus on reconstructing the gates and clearing the roads." Davos gave her a weathered smile. "Hey, we'll do what we can." That was all they could do, day by day. Rebuild, negotiate, ration, keep watch for threats. Each dawn brought new challenges. A group of peasants from the outlying hamlets might arrive, demanding security from roving outlaws. A merchant might turn up with a cart of salted fish, hoping for a royal license to sell it at a high price. Broken families needed burials for their dead. The tasks were endless. Arya began to meet these demands personally, under a half-collapsed roof in the Red Keep courtyard, where a makeshift dais had been erected so she could hear petitions. She loathed the ceremony but saw its necessity. The common folk needed to see her face, to know there was someone listening. So she sat on a plain wooden chair. She had no interest in the old throne's melted remains, and had each petitioner state their case. Tyrion stood by her side as her hand, though the official naming was still a formality they'd yet to conduct. Davos hovered close, offering counsel on shipping or commerce. Brienne was never far, ensuring no one approached with ill intent. Some requests were easily granted. A blacksmith shop needed tools replaced. She authorized him to salvage iron from the ruined gates. A group of farmers needed help clearing a road. She assigned a handful of soldiers, but others were more complex. Families who had lost everything in the fire, wanting immediate relief that Arya simply couldn't provide in full. She gave them what little coin the treasury still had, or had them registered on a list for aid from the grain shipments. It pained her to see tears in their eyes when the help was barely enough to keep them alive, but she did what she could. As the sun drifted high overhead, one petitioner stood out among the rest. An older woman, hair streaked with gray, accompanied by a younger man wearing a tattered cloak. The woman introduced herself as Urswick, caretaker of an orphanage that once stood near Flea Bottom. Daenerys' fires had reduced it to ash. She had gathered the surviving children, but they had no shelter, no food beyond scraps. The younger man was apparently a volunteer who'd been helping her. Arya listened intently to the tale of how the flames had ripped through cramped alleys, leaving orphans huddled behind broken walls. She felt the memory of her own hunger, back when she was a child surviving in the rubble of wars. She recalled watching men die, seeing children scrounge in the dirt for scraps. She could almost taste that old bitterness. "I beg you, if you have anything at all," We need a safe place for the children, Erzwick pleaded. Many are ill. The sept was destroyed, and the new one, Unstruction, burned. We can't stay in the streets. Arya glanced at Tyrion, then at Davos. She had seen the vacant stable yards near the Red Keep, empty since the chaos. There are some storerooms in the keep's lower halls that might provide shelter, she said slowly. It's not ideal, but at least it's a roof and close to our guards. There's also a yard out back that was once used for storing feed. We can arrange cots and maybe some blankets. As for food, she looked to Davos. He nodded. We'll see if we can spare a few barrels from the earliest shipments. It won't be lavish, but enough to keep them from starving. Tyrion added in a measured tone. Once the next shipments arrive, we can improve conditions. But for now, I agree with her grace. We should bring the orphans into the keep. They'll be safer here. Tears glistened in the old woman's eyes. She bowed low. Thank you, my queen. The children and I thank you. The younger man echoed her gratitude, glancing at Arya with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Arya dipped her head, feeling a pang of emotion she rarely let surface. She remembered being an orphan of sorts herself on the run. If she could at least give these children a chance to survive, it was worth any trouble. By late afternoon, her shoulders ached from sitting on the chair, hearing countless pleas. She needed a moment alone. Passing the days to Tyrion's authority, she slipped away, Brienne quietly shadowing her through the keep's corridors, until Arya indicated she wished to walk alone. Brienne hesitated, but finally relented. Call if you need me, she said. Arya gave a grateful nod, leaving the tall knight behind. She made her way to the ramparts overlooking Blackwater Bay, picking a route that led her through half-fallen walls. The climb was precarious, littered with loose stones. Every step kicked a bit of rubble aside, sending it rattling down. At the top, she found a ledge where part of the battlement remained intact, providing a vantage over the harbor. The sea stretched out, shimmering in the distance. The wind ruffled her hair, carrying the salty tang of brine and faint echoes of seagulls. As she gazed upon the water, she felt the old longing spark inside her, the desire to see what lay beyond Westeros, the horizon's call. She had planned to sail west once, to explore where no one else had gone. Now, that path seemed a distant dream. She was tethered to this city by the crown she had never wanted. Yet she also felt an odd sense of purpose. So many times she had drifted from one mission to the next, never certain of her place. Now, for better or worse, she had a place, a reason to stay. Did it suffocate her, or give her life meaning? Perhaps both. Her moment of solitude was interrupted by the sound of footsteps clattering on the rubble behind her. She turned to see Gendry approach, dust on his trousers, hair damp with sweat, as if he'd been working. He paused, catching his breath. I was looking for you, he said, scanning the battered stone. Brienne mentioned you came up here. She gave a nod, turning her eyes to the sea again. Needed some air. It's hard to breathe in that hall when every person wants me to wave a hand and solve their troubles. He moved closer, resting his palms on the ledge beside her. You know you don't have to do this alone. Tyrion, Davos, the rest, we're here to help. And me, I'm here too if you need it. She managed a small half-smile, remembering how once upon a time, she'd been a scruffy girl racing through forests, and he a bastard blacksmith forging helm after helm. I appreciate it. It's just, I wish I could do more. Give them real hope rather than bandages on bleeding wounds. Them? Hisabi? Gendry shrugged. Maybe small mercies are all we can manage right now. Step by step. He glanced at her from the corner of his eye. I hear you managed to broker peace with Grey Worm, or at least a truce. That's a start, isn't it? She let out a slow breath. Yes. Joan's free. The Unsullied will leave. Fewer swords at our throats. But I also gave them a promise for ships. We'll have to procure them somehow. The royal fleet is half destroyed in the harbor, and we lack the coin to commission new vessels anytime soon. I'll have to parley with the lords of the Narrow Sea, see if they'll lend or sell us ships. Num went wall. He frowned. You'll find a way. His hand shifted on the stone, inches from hers, but he didn't reach for her. "Arya, I know you never wanted to be queen, but seeing you, the way you talk to the small folk, the seriousness in your eyes, you're more suited to this than you think." She didn't respond immediately, letting the wind brush her face. After a long pause, she said, "We'll see how suited I am when the next crisis comes. One misstep and they'll turn on me. Or the city will starve, or the lords will decide to break away. It's all so precarious." He shifted his stance. "It's always precarious, isn't it? Even under the best kings, war or famine or something else threatens. But you won't turn into a tyrant. That's the difference. You know too well what it's like to have nothing." She closed her eyes, letting the memory of her past swirl through her mind. The nights she spent sleeping under hedges, the kills she made, the ghosts of her list. That life shaped her. "I'll do my best," she said at last, opening her eyes to the wide sea. "Just promise me, Gendry, that if I lose my way, you'll help me see sense." He gave a rueful grin. "I promise. Though I suspect you'll always see sense, more than any of us." For a few heartbeats, they stood in companionable silence, listening to the wind rattle the broken stone. Then from below, a voice called Arya's name. She saw a soldier waving from the courtyard. Duty beckoned again. She and Gendry descended, weaving through the shattered spiral stairwell. In the courtyard, the soldier relayed that a messenger from the Reach had arrived. Samwell Tarly Stewart, apparently with urgent news. Arya glanced at Gendry, who offered a quick nod, and together they followed the soldier to a quiet corner of the keep's courtyard. There, a portly young man in Tarly livery waited, dust coating his boots. He bowed clumsily when Arya approached. "Your Grace," he began, voice quavering, "I come with word from Lord Samwell Tarly. He sends greetings and hopes the city is recovering. He also, well, he says that a large caravan of grain and other supplies is en route, but bandits have been spotted along the Roserad. Lord Samwell requests that you dispatch men to ensure safe passage. He fears the bandits might torch the wagons rather than let them pass." Arya's brow furrowed. "How many bandits?" The messenger bit his lip. "A sizable group, possibly remnants of Selzwards left over from the war, or men who deserted during the siege. They've been striking lonely travelers, taking what they can. Lord Samwell's men have held them off so far, but the caravan is large and slow. And if the bandits gather in greater numbers, it could become a real threat." "Nanani?" Arya nodded. "We can't afford to lose that shipment. Without it, the people here will starve." She looked at Gendry. "We need to send a detachment, enough to deter these bandits." Gendry rubbed a hand across his jaw. "I can gather some of the Stormland Knights, plus maybe a few men from the City Watch. We don't have many cavalry though. Most horses were lost in the fires." "Then we'll use what we have." She turned back to the messenger. "Return to Lord Samwell. Tell him we'll send a column of riders to meet the caravan halfway. Ensure the caravan stops at a safe point until our men arrive." Relief brightened the messenger's face. "Thank you, Your Grace. Lord Samwell will be grateful indeed." He bowed again, then retreated. Arya sighed. Every time she solved one problem, another took its place. "I wonder how Father did this," she murmured. "Ruling over the North seemed simpler, but I'm sure it had its share of troubles. He never spoke of them in front of us kids." Gendry gave a half chuckle. "Probably because you were kids and would have asked endless questions about bandits and taxes. Best not to scare the children." She managed a thin smile. "Come on, let's find Davos. We need to plan this deployment. We can't spare many men, but enough to matter." They walked through the keep's corridors, weaving among laborers and minor lords. Along the way, she noticed glimpses of improvement. New beams shoring up damaged walls, fresh water being delivered to the wells, fewer piles of rubble as carts hauled stone away. In small increments, the city was clawing its way back to life. As she passed, some folk bowed. Others merely glanced at her, eyes filled with guarded hope. She wasn't sure how to respond, so she gave them a nod, meeting their gaze directly. Let them see that she was no aloof monarch. They found Davos in the corner of the courtyard, deep in conversation with a man wearing plain homespun clothes. The man seemed upset, gesturing wildly, while Davos tried to calm him. When Arya approached, the man fell silent, casting a wary glance at her. "Your Grace," Davos said, turning toward her. "This is Herod from Rosby. He claims there's a ragged group of sellswords camped near his lands, pressing the small folk for coins and supplies." Herod bowed stiffly. "I beg pardon, my queen, but they are cunning and armed. We fear for our harvest. If they take our crops, we won't have enough for winter. We sought help from Lord Rosby, but his men are few, and he's uncertain of your stance on these matters." Arya tried to keep frustration from rising in her chest. Another group of armed bandits. A second, or perhaps the same group, that threatened the Reach caravan. This was the new normal. Scattered warbands that refused to disband, and now preyed on farmers. "We can't let these men pillage your lands," she said firmly. "Lord Rosby should have known I'd not stand for that. But we're stretched thin. We might be able to send a small troop if we coordinate carefully." Herod's voice wavered with hope. "Anything would help, Your Grace." Arya gave a resolute nod. "Return home. Gather your folk in the main holdfast if you can. We'll see that riders come to clear out these sellswords, but it may take time. In the meantime, do what you can to fortify. I promise we won't abandon you." Tears pricked the man's eyes, and he bowed again before hurrying away. Arya let out a slow breath. Davos shook his head. Bandits in Rosby, bandits on the Roserwad, bandits everywhere. If the realm is at peace, no one told these men that war is over. "We'll handle it," Arya said. "But I fear we'll need to build up a larger city watch, and we don't have enough seasoned fighters for every corner of the Crown lands. We'll have to rely on local lords. Tyrion can help draft instructions, clarifying that they remain under my authority. I don't want multiple armies running about without oversight." Davos pursed his lips. "A wise plan. You'll need to standardize it somehow. Let them know that the Crown demands each lord protect their lands, and if they fail, they forfeit certain privileges. It's a delicate balance." "Nine?" Arya nodded. "That's the price of peace. Coordination." She glanced around, noticing Gendry had drifted off to speak with one of his Stormland knights. "Let's call a brief war council tonight. We'll define who's taking which roads, who's covering Rosby, and who's heading to meet Sam's caravan. Then we'll rest. Tomorrow, I'll see if we can do something about the city's water system. I heard a rumor that half the wells are contaminated or blocked." "Never." Davos gave a soft chuckle. "One day you're meeting with Grey Worm, the next you're clearing bandits. If only the Seven Kingdoms could see how complicated ruling truly is." She shot him a wry look. "If they did, maybe fewer people would want the throne." They parted ways, each carrying a mental list of tasks. As the light stretched into late afternoon, Arya stole a brief moment to visit Jon. She found him seated in the keep's courtyard, near a newly erected table scattered with maps and letters. He seemed to be discussing outposts and defenses with a few men from the north, who recognized him as the White Wolf. When Arya approached, they turned and bowed to her. Jon rose. "Arya," he said warmly. "I see you found a way to help," she observed, smiling despite her fatigue. He nodded. "They asked me about fortifying certain roads north of the Trident. I may not be a king, but I know how to plan a defense." She placed a hand lightly on his shoulder, grateful for his presence. "That's good. We need all the help we can get." "Nani?" His eyes flicked over her face, concern in the lines of his brow. "You look exhausted." "So do you," she replied, though she was touched by his worry. "It's just the way of things now. Perhaps we'll get a few hours of rest tonight." He mustered a faint smile. "I'll do what I can here, then try to find a decent bed in one of these half-burned rooms. You be careful, all right?" She nodded. "Always." Evening crept upon the city, the sky streaked with red and gold. Arya found herself standing again in the half-ruined throne room, where the molten remains of the Iron Throne still jutted from the floor in twisted lumps. She had given orders for it to be cleared away eventually, melted down for raw metal that might be used to forge new tools or weapons. That felt symbolic, turning the swords of conquest into something practical. But the labor was slow, and the throne still loomed like a gnarled ghost in the fading light. She walked up to it, placing a hand on the blackened metal. It was cool now, no longer glowing from dragonfire. Yet it bore the scars of that final conflagration. She wondered if perhaps it was best that the symbol of kingship was destroyed. Power in this realm had been too entangled with fear and violence. Maybe a simpler seat, a plain dais or a wooden chair, was better for a ruler who wished to serve rather than dominate. She withdrew her hand, footsteps echoing in the chamber. The door behind her creaked open, and Tyrion entered, carrying a small lantern. He didn't speak at first, letting the hush linger. Then he said, "I brought wine, if you'd care to share a cup after this long day." Arya nodded. "Yes, please. A small respite might help." He set the lantern on a broken chunk of marble, and poured 2 cups from a skin he carried. Handing one to Arya, he raised his own in a quiet toast. "To those who survive," he said softly, then took a sip. She drank as well, the wine running warm down her throat. "It's not half bad," she observed. "Where'd you find it?" "In the rubble of the cellars. A few casks survived. No one's begun sorting them yet. So I helped myself." He let out a small sigh, eyeing the twisted remains of the throne. "I'm sorry, you know, about all of this." She frowned slightly. "Why are you apologizing now? For championing Daenerys when I should have seen the signs? For dragging everyone into a war that cost thousands of innocent lives? For not finding a better way?" He swirled the wine in his cup. "But I suppose regrets won't fix the city." Arya studied him. "You believed in her dream. I don't blame you for wanting a better world." She seemed unstoppable, until it all came crashing down. "We can't rewrite the past." He nodded. "Still, I thought you should know I carry that burden. I'll do what I can to make amends. As your hand, if you'll have me. Officially." She set her wine cup aside. "Yes. I would have you as hand. I might not always agree with you, and I won't hesitate to dismiss you if I think you're not doing what's right. But you see the realm's needs clearly, and you have a clever mind for politics." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Your Grace. I'll do my best not to lose my head." They stood in silence for a moment, letting the day's fatigue settle into their bones. The red light streaming through the shattered roof slowly bled into purple. At length, Tyrion lifted the lantern. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow will be just as demanding." Arya nodded and followed him out of the throne room. Shadows danced on the walls as they wound through the corridors. Tyrion bowed politely and drifted off to his own small chamber. Arya reached the chamber she'd claimed, once a lesser room for a minor courtier, not entirely collapsed. The bed was a patchwork of salvaged linens, but it offered a place to lie her head. She eased the door shut, sinking onto the edge of the bed. Distantly, she heard the city's noises. A cart rumbling, a child crying, boots echoing on stone. She leaned back, letting her eyes close. A whirl of memories haunted her. The face of the many-faced god in Bravos, the black waters outside Harrenhal, the house of black and white. Needle in her hand for the first time, her father's gentle voice guiding her stance. The chaotic flight from King's Landing after her father's execution. The direwolf sigil on Winterfell's gates. The moment she drove her dagger into the Night King's core. Now the faint new memory of speaking as queen to peasants who bowed before her, desperate for help. Life had never ceased changing around her, forcing her to adapt or die. She inhaled slowly. For all her regrets and doubts, she would face whatever came next with the same determination. The realm needed stability, justice, maybe even a gentle hand when possible. She would not become Joffrey or Cersei or any of the nightmares who had reigned before. The illusions of power that ruined so many were lost on her, for she knew the price of death too well. At last, she slipped under the thin blanket, letting the murmur of the city lull her. Sleep came fitfully, broken by dreams of dragons and shadows flitting across the water. But still it offered a few hours' refuge. When dawn arrived, she woke to the call of voices in the corridor. Outside her chamber, a swirl of commotion indicated the new day's demands were already piling up. She sat up, blinking away sleep. Another day, another onslaught of problems to solve. But she would meet them head-on. She was Arya Stark, the queen who had never wanted the throne, the woman who'd once been no one, forging a tomorrow out of yesterday's ashes. With a determined breath, she rose, dressed, and stepped out into the corridor, ready to do it all again. Even if it weighed upon her bones, she would bear it. She had endured worse. And as long as she wore the crown, she would serve as fiercely as she had once fought with a sword. It was a promise she made to her people, to her long-dead family, and ultimately, to herself. She emerged from her chamber into a corridor already humming with voices. A pair of guards in mismatched armor stood at attention, offering a small bow as she passed. She acknowledged them with a curt nod, too preoccupied to linger on ceremony. Word spread quickly of her presence, and within moments, a steward hurried up, breathless, clutching a roll of parchment that fluttered with each step. He fell into stride beside her, trying to keep pace. He explained that a handful of new arrivals from the Westerlands were petitioning for audience, that the City Watch had uncovered a small group of assassins who'd once worked for Cersei Lannister, and that a septon from the Faith requested permission to hold open-air sermons in the ruined square. Arya felt her head spin with the litany of tasks, the city's clamor pressing in on all sides. She never realized a throne, even half-melted, could generate so many demands. She made her way to the courtyard that had become a central hub of activity. The sun was still low, painting the rubble-strewn ground in soft gold. Workers bustled about, sorting salvageable timber, while a donkey-drawn cart rattled by carrying fresh water casks. A group of children passed through, most of them wide-eyed orphans who had been relocated to the keep's storerooms. They paused to watch as Arya strode across the courtyard, and she offered them the faintest smile, remembering how frightened she'd been at their age in a city that always seemed to be on the brink of chaos. Tyrion waited near a makeshift table, deep in conversation with Davos. The table was littered with letters, rough sketches of building plans, a few scraps of salted fish for breakfast. Tyrion glanced up when he saw Arya approach. He took the last bite of fish, swallowed, and gestured for her to join them. Davos greeted her with a respectful half-bow, looking tired but determined. "Your Grace," Tyrion said, his voice touched by a note of wryness he never fully lost. "We've had word that the caravan from the Reach is delayed. They encountered those bandits we discussed. Our men intercepted in time, but it cost them a few wagons. The rest should arrive intact, just late." "Nessentor." Arya stiffened. "Any serious injuries?" "Minor," Davos answered. "A few Stormland knights took blows, but they'll heal." The bandits scattered when confronted with real resistance. "The bulk of the grain shipment should still come in. It means another day or two before the city sees the supplies, though." She exhaled. "We can manage if it's only a day or two. Let's hope no more trouble finds them on the way." Then she gestured to the stack of letters. "Anything else?" Davos lifted a parchment. "We've a message from Lord Royce of the Vale. He's requesting a formal arrangement with the Crown. Some trade concessions, essentially. The Vale wants to sell iron ore to us at a favorable rate, if we guarantee their caravans safe passage along the King's Road." "Nestor." Tyrion tapped the parchment. "We need that iron. Repairs to the gates, forging new tools, maybe even rebuilding what remains of the City Watch's arms. The only issue is that we can't yet promise complete safety along every mile of road. Too many stray mercenaries and bandit companies linger." Arya brushed a fleck of dust off her sleeve. "Send a reply that we accept his terms in principle. We'll do our best to protect those caravans, but he must be patient while we expand our patrols. We can't be everywhere at once." Tyrion nodded. "Understood." He pulled another letter from the pile. "There's also a raven from Braavos. They've heard rumors of the realm's upheaval, and they're inquiring if trade across the Narrow Sea will be stable. They're concerned about potential blockades or piracy in the Stepstones." Arya felt the stir of old memories. Braavos, the House of Black and White, the narrow canals. For a moment, she could almost taste the briny tang of the Titan's shadow looming over the city. "We haven't the resources to patrol the Stepstones right now. Tell them trade should remain open, but I can't promise an immediate crackdown on pirates. If they want to fund some measure of protection, we can talk." Otherwise, the crown must focus on its own roads and farmland first. Tyrion's mouth quirked slightly. A fair stance. I'll phrase it diplomatically. Braavos is often more friend than foe, if we maintain careful relations. Arya's gaze swept the courtyard. I'll trust you to handle it. Then she noticed Gendry striding toward them, leading two men clad in battered armor marked with a stag sigil. Let's see what Gendry has to say, she murmured, waiting as he approached. Gendry stopped a few paces away, inclining his head in greeting. Your Grace, he said, slightly awkward with the formal address. I've got two knights from the Stormlands here, Sir Andren and Sir Fret. They've come to report on the roads leading south. Sounds like more trouble near Hayford. Possibly the same bandit group or a different one. Nobody's sure yet. No. Arya clenched her jaw. Where exactly? Near a burned-out village about 2 leagues from Hayford's holdfast. Gendry glanced at the knights, who both nodded gravely. They burned a local homestead last night, took livestock, threatened anyone who resisted. We suspect they might be ex-Lannister soldiers who turned rogue after the war. Or maybe they're just opportunists. She felt a surge of frustration. It seemed every day brought fresh reports of violence. We can't let them terrorize the countryside. Tyrion, Davos, can we spare more men? Than the Westbury. Tyrion squinted. We spread thin, but perhaps we can reassign some from the city watch. With the caravan nearly here, our men can return after escorting it. A quick sweep might flush these outlaws out. Davos ran a hand over his stubble. It's risky, but we'll do it. We can't let them dig in. If they sense we're hesitating, they'll only grow bolder. Arya turned to Gendry. Coordinate with Davos and the knights. Gather a small force, no more than 50 if that's what we can spare. Root them out. If they surrender, offer them the chance to lay down arms and face a trial. If they resist, do what you must. Baron. Gendry gave a resolute nod. I'll see to it right away. He waved the 2 knights to follow him. As he left, Arya felt a pang of guilt. Gendry had wanted to help rebuild the city's forges, but so often, she had to send him off to deal with bandits or negotiations. She wondered if he resented that his new lordship came with so much dirty work. She brushed the thought aside, reminding herself that none of them had chosen this path out of ease. They did what needed doing. She turned back to Tyrion and Davos. Let's finalize everything we can here before midday. I'm sure more trouble will find us by afternoon. They worked through the backlog of petitions and letters until her head felt stuffed with shifting alliances, demands, and half-formed pleas. By midday, she excused herself to grab a spare moment of solace. Passing through the Red Keep's corridors, she found a narrow stair leading to an upper level that was partially collapsed. The sunlight streamed through the broken stone like a jagged window. She slid around the debris to emerge onto a small ledge that overlooked the city. Even from this vantage, she could see the city's wounded sprawl. Entire districts still burned out husks. Many residents building makeshift huts where their homes once stood. She heard the distant clang of a hammer on metal, and realized some blacksmith was forging anew. That faint metallic ring brought a strange comfort. Her eyes drifted to the water beyond the harbor. It glimmered in the midday sun, calm and unconcerned with mortal troubles. She remembered her old dream of sailing west, away from everything, away from war, from thrones, from lists of vengeance and regrets. A part of her still longed for that freedom, the open sea whispering of adventures unbound by duty. But each time the urge rose, she recalled the faces of starving children, of frightened farmers, and she knew she couldn't abandon them now. Not with a realm so fragile, not when a single misstep could plunge it into chaos again. Footsteps behind her made her turn. Jon stepped through the rubble, brow furrowed. He hesitated at the sight of her perched on that precarious ledge, but she waved him closer. He carefully picked his way over fallen stones, joining her. Looking for a bit of air? He asked quietly, scanning the city below. She nodded, lips curving in a tired half-smile. It's quieter up here. No one calling me your grace every moment. He gave a weary chuckle. I remember feeling that way in the north, after we declared independence from the south. The titles weigh heavier than they sound. She studied his profile. He seemed calmer now, free from the guilt and captivity that had once etched shadows under his eyes. But she sensed a lingering sorrow in him, like an old wound that wouldn't quite heal. "You've been helping organize the watch? I hear you've given them sound advice on strategy." He gave a slight nod. "I've done my best." Brienne asked for my input. "She's done a fine job shaping them into a real force, but they need more training. I'm just passing along lessons I learned in the Night's Watch. Discipline, vigilance, the importance of unity." He paused. "They're listening at least." She let her gaze stray to the broken skyline. "I'm grateful. We need all of the help we can get. Someday, if the city recovers, maybe I can let you go your own way." He looked at her sharply. "Are you trying to push me off?" She smiled a little, shaking her head. "No. I just know you value your freedom too. We're all bound by old ghosts. If you ever want to ride north, or even sail away like I once planned to, I'd understand." He pressed his lips together. "For now I'll stay. I owe that much, at least, to the people who suffered under Daenerys' final wrath. Maybe later I'll see the Wall again, or the free folk. But the city still needs a firm hand. They trust you because you're not hungry for power. And maybe some trust me because I helped end her reign." His eyes drifted to the rubble. "Though I don't feel any triumph in it." She didn't speak, because she understood. Ending Daenerys' life was no victory. It was a choice made in despair, to save countless innocents. Sometimes, that was all life offered, a choice between two horrors. She laid a hand on his arm briefly, then stepped back. "All right, let's go see what new demands have arrived since we snuck away for these few minutes." They made their way back down the rubble-strewn stairs, emerging into the corridor that led to the courtyard. She heard raised voices ahead. Arguments, perhaps. The day had grown warmer, and the air in the keep felt stifling. As they approached, they found a cluster of lords and lesser knights crowded around Tyrion, each speaking at once. Tyrion looked exasperated, trying to manage them. When he spotted Arya, relief flickered in his eyes. Arya stepped forward, letting her voice cut through the din. "What's the matter?" The men fell silent. One stepped forward, a tall fellow with a sunburnt face, and a cloth of gold doublet, though the edges were singed. "Your Grace, Lord Gaunt's men have seized a granary storehouse outside the city, claiming it for themselves. They say they have rightful claim because Gaunt's father built it under the old Targaryen regime. They refuse to release the grain, and the small folk are losing out. We came here asking for a decree clarifying the crown's authority over such storehouses." "The city watch says it can't intervene without direct orders." "Demosavsas," Tyrion murmured. "I was trying to explain that the grain belongs to the realm until such time as rightful ownership can be established. But Lord Gaunt's men have armed themselves and want to budge." Arya took a moment to process. She remembered House Gaunt as a minor house from the Crownlands, sworn once to the Targaryens, and then shifting loyalties through the wars. She guessed their lands were in disarray, and they saw a chance to hoard resources. "How far is this storehouse from the city gates?" "Only a mile," the man answered. "Near the main road leading east. The watch could easily march there, but they need your explicit permission." Arya's jaw tightened. Lord Gaunt has no right to starve the populace. That grain is essential. Davos, have we been relying on that storehouse for distribution? From behind the crowd, Davos stepped forward. We have. We'd been funneling leftover stores to the small folk, rationing carefully. If Gaunt's men refuse to release it, we'll have hungry bellies in the streets by tomorrow." Arya nodded. "Then we'll reassert control. Tyrion, draft a formal statement. All existing storehouses in the Crownlands are under direct royal command until the crisis passes. We'll fairly compensate the rightful owners once the realm is stable, but no hoarding is allowed." Tyrion bowed his head. "Yes, Your Grace." Arya looked at the group of knights. "Organize a small force from the watch. March to the storehouse. Demand Gaunt's men stand down. If they refuse, remove them by force, but minimize bloodshed. If Lord Gaunt wants to dispute this, he can come in person to talk to me. In the meantime, that grain must be released for the city." "Then too." The men exchanged glances, nodding in agreement. The man in the singed doublet exhaled a sigh of relief. "Thank you, Your Grace. We'll see it done." They dispersed, conversations swirling among them. Arya watched them go, the tension in her shoulders unrelenting. She was resolving one conflict after another, day after day, but it felt like bailing water from a leaky boat. For every problem solved, two more sprang up. Tyrion approached quietly. "You handled that well. There will be more issues like it. Lords or knights seizing resources, trying to stake their own claims while the crown is perceived as weak. We need to show we won't tolerate it." She managed a nod. "I know, and I will show them, one way or another." By late afternoon, a caravan of battered wagons limped through the city gates, escorted by weary men wearing the Stormlands banner. The wagons bore precious sacks of grain, crates of onions, dried fruit, and even some casks of ale. The small folk gathered, whispering with hope, as the wagons rattled across the cobblestones toward the Red Keep. Arya emerged from the courtyard to greet them, flanked by Brienne and a few watchmen. Gendry rode in at the front, his cloak dusty, hair disheveled. She caught his eye as he dismounted. "We feared you'd lost more wagons." Gendry wiped sweat from his brow. "It was call, but we drove the bandits off. This is most of what Sam Tarly sent. A few sacks spoiled in the delay. Still, it's enough to feed the city for a while." Arya's relief was palpable. "Good. Have the watch unload and distribute carefully. We'll set up ration lines in the market squares, so the poorest can get their share." No. The Stormland Knights began overseeing the offloading of supplies. A handful of city folk, older women, men with hollow cheeks, watched anxiously, waiting for a sign they could queue for food. Arya called out that proper distribution would begin by evening. Once the stock was tallied, she heard a ripple of approval, though caution lingered in many eyes. They'd been disappointed so often. As the supplies were hauled into the keep's storerooms, Arya and Gendry stepped aside, letting the men handle the manual labor. "Well done," she said in a lower tone. "You're leading them capably." He shrugged, dust swirling around his feet. "These men respect me, because Daenerys named me Lord Baratheon, and you confirmed it. I still feel like a blacksmith half the time." She offered a small smile. "That might be why they follow you. You're no pompous lord. You're one of them, in spirit." He ducked his head. "I'm trying. Listen, I've heard rumors there might be iron deposits in the Stormlands. If we can reopen some old mines, we could supply the city's foundries more cheaply. It'd help with forging new weapons or tools for rebuilding. Might even create more jobs." She considered. "That's worth looking into. If you can handle it, coordinate with Tyrion and Davos. We'll need laborers, a stable route to transport the ore, and some arrangement on taxes. But it could be a boon in the long term." Gendry nodded, looking determined. "I'll see to it. Bit by bit, we'll get this city back on its feet." She parted ways with him then, and for the next hours, she moved through the battered streets, checking on the ration lines. The city watch stood guard to prevent riots. People queued with baskets or sacks, receiving measured scoops of grain, small lumps of dried fruit, a precious ladle of stew if they lingered near the open cauldrons. It wasn't enough to sat all hunger, but it would prevent outright starvation. She spoke quietly with a few mothers who cradled hungry infants, telling them that more shipments were on the way. While most simply nodded, uncertain, a few offered tearful thanks. One old man pressed her hand, murmuring a blessing in the name of the old gods and the new. She felt a pang of humility. In the north, they prayed differently, but she respected any faith that might give people hope. Dusk fell slowly, the sky bathing the city in a deep orange glow. The laborers extinguished their torches, leaving the ration lines to break for the night. Some folk slept by the keep's walls, hoping to be first in line the next morning. Arya ordered a few extra guards posted to ensure no robberies. Then she returned to the keep, too weary to notice much as she navigated the torchlit corridors. She found Tyrion, Davos, Brienne, and Jon waiting near the battered remains of a once grand hall that had partially caved in. A large wooden table was set up among the ruins, apparently where they intended to eat and hold an evening meeting. She approached, noticing they had bowls of stew and flagons of watered-down ale. Brienne offered her a respectful nod, shifting to make room. Davos set aside a sheaf of parchment. Tyrion looked up from his half-eaten bowl and gave a weary smile. "I know it's not a fancy banquet, Your Grace, but we have stew and a place to sit. That counts for something." Arya eased onto a makeshift bench. "It counts for a lot these days." She accepted a wooden bowl from Brienne, thanking her quietly. Steam rose, carrying a simple aroma of onions and salted meat. She took a sip, letting the warmth chase away the chill that had seeped into her bones. They ate in relative silence for a while, exhaustion too heavy for idle chatter. Now and then, one of them murmured about the day's trials. Bandits near Rosby, the storehouse dispute, Grey worms unsullied still preparing to depart once ships were ready. Finally, when the bowls were nearly empty, Tyrion cleared his throat. "I've asked you here to discuss another matter," he said, folding his hands. "We haven't held a formal coronation for Arya. The realm acknowledges her, but it's all been quite improvised. I wonder if the time has come to formalize the monarchy. A small ceremony, perhaps, to let the lords reaffirm their support, and for the small folk to witness it." "That'd be minor." Arya tensed. "A coronation? In the middle of all this? We can't waste resources on feasts and pageantry." Tyrion's eyes were thoughtful. "We don't need a lavish affair, but symbols matter. You, of all people, know how important a name or a face can be. If the realm sees you properly crowned, perhaps with a new crown made of simpler metal, they might be assured there's stability, that this isn't just another passing warlord on the throne." Jon nodded slowly. "It would also let the lords see you as a leader in your own right, not simply Ned Stark's daughter or the one who slayed the Night King. Sometimes ceremony cements loyalty." Brienne's voice was respectful, but firm. "I believe it could help unify those who still doubt. If we do it humbly, focusing on rebuilding rather than splendor, it might send the right message." Davos chimed in, rubbing the back of his neck. "If you'll pardon my words, Your Grace, I agree. We're not calling for a festival of gold and jewels. But we need something. The city might find renewed hope in a coronation that honors the cost we all paid." "Then, in the end?" Arya set her bowl aside, feeling the stew swirl in her stomach. She hated the idea of standing before a crowd in regal finery, reciting vows, letting them call her queen in some elaborate tradition. Yet every part of her council insisted it was necessary. She took a slow breath. "All right. But it has to be modest. No feasts beyond what would feed anyone else. No extravagance. Our coin belongs to the city's recovery." Tyrion looked pleased. "Of course. We can hold the ceremony in what remains of the dragon pit, or perhaps even in the courtyard. Invite the lords who are nearby. Let the small folk witness from a safe vantage." "Is it now?" Arya gave a slow nod. "Very well. But don't expect me to wear some monstrous crown like the Targaryens used to. Something small, simple, like a band of iron or steel hammered into shape. That's all. And no fancy speeches about bloodlines and destiny." A ghost of a smile touched Davos' lips. "Steel would be fitting for you." Tyrion chuckled lightly. "We'll arrange it. I'll see if Gendry can forge something suitable." "It's your wish." "Nanny." Arya looked around the circle, seeing relief in their eyes. They needed this ceremony more than she did, she realized. They wanted a symbol to hold on to, a sign that perhaps the realm was moving from chaos to something resembling order. She set her jaw. "We'll do it soon, maybe within a fortnight. Enough time to gather the local lords, to ensure no one starves while we stand around." They murmured agreement. Then a lull fell, and fatigue weighed on them all. Jon excused himself to check on a guard rotation. Brienne and Davos left to plan the next day's patrols. Tyrion lingered. Arya rose, gathering her thoughts. She paused, looking at Tyrion in the flickering torchlight. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for suggesting it. You might be right." He tilted his head. "Sometimes, we all need a reminder of what we're fighting for. A stable realm. A chance to let the next generation grow up without fear of dragons, White Walkers, or tyrants." She nodded, parting ways with him, and headed down a corridor that had been partially cleared of debris. On one side, an archway led to an old gallery with high windows. Most of the colored glass was shattered, leaving a mosaic of jagged edges that cast fractured moonlight on the floor. She wandered in, letting her footsteps echo. A hush settled over her, a sense of being caught between the old and the new. This was a city of ghosts and scars. She thought of her father again, Ned Stark, a man who came south believing in honor and duty, only to be betrayed. She thought of how he might have guided her now. He probably would have said it's a ruler's responsibility to place the people first, to keep justice above personal ambition. He'd never have wanted a crown. Yet he'd also have done whatever was required to safeguard the realm. She felt both comfort and sadness at the thought. Maybe she carried a piece of him in her, an echo of that quiet sense of duty. The moon rose higher, shining through the windows, painting the floor with silver. She sat on a broken pedestal once used to display a statue, letting the night air brush her face. Memories drifted unbidden. Traveling the King's Road as a girl, capturing pigeons in Flea Bottom to survive, fighting for her life in Bravos. And then the final battles, the Night King's death, the ruin of King's Landing. How strange it was to be here, queen of a kingdom she once loathed. She didn't know how much time passed before footsteps broke the stillness. Gendry's figure appeared in the doorway, faintly illuminated by the moon's glow. He paused, as if uncertain whether to approach. She beckoned him closer. He stepped inside, closing the distance with a careful pace, eyes scanning the shattered windows. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked quietly. She shook her head. "Too much in my mind. Tyrion wants a coronation. We're to find a crown." He managed a soft laugh. A crown for the girl who once said she'd never be a lady, let alone a queen. Life is strange. She gave a rueful smile. "Strange indeed." He suggested you might forge it. His brows lifted slightly. "I'd be honored. What did you have in mind?" "Something simple," she said, feeling a pang of self-consciousness at the idea of crowning herself. "A narrow band of steel, maybe etched with a wolf's head. Nothing too elaborate. Nothing that suggests tyranny or old power. Just a symbol that the realm has a protector." He nodded, thoughtful. "I can do that. I'll get started soon. Might take me a day or two, but I'll find decent steel. The city's forges are still half ruined. I'll make do." "Nice." She sensed a warmth in his tone, a pride at being able to craft something meaningful. "Thank you," she murmured. "I trust your skill more than any fancy armorer in the Westerlands." A quiet moment passed, the hush filled by the faint sound of wind threading through the broken windows. She shifted on the pedestal, studying the curve of his face in the moonlight. She recalled times when she'd been simply Arya the Traveler, a ghost of the Seven Kingdoms. Times they'd shared quiet nights around a campfire. Times she'd refused his offer of a place at Storm's End. She wondered if life might have been simpler if she'd chosen differently then. But she had no real regrets. The path they each walked had led them here, to a fragile realm that needed them both. He broke the silence. "Arya, you know I support you. But do you ever wish we could go back to the Riverlands or the Stormlands, away from all this? Sometimes I see you, weighed down by decisions you never wanted." She let out a soft breath. "All the time. But I can't walk away. Maybe one day, if the realm is stable and someone better can take over, I'll sail west, or roam the fields with Nymeria and her pack. But not now." "Nothing." He nodded slowly, stepping closer, so near she could see the scars on his hands from smithing. "Then we'll do our best to build that future. A realm that doesn't devour its own people." She reached out and lightly clasped his calloused fingers. The contact was brief, a silent affirmation of understanding. Then she withdrew. "Get some rest," she said softly. "We have much to do tomorrow." He offered the faintest smile, eyes lingering on her. "Good night, Your Grace." She watched him go, then remained in the moonlit gallery a while longer, letting her thoughts wander. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her, and she made her way back through the quiet halls to her makeshift chamber. Sleep came in fitful waves, plagued by dreams of running through dark forests, forging steel crowns in blazing furnaces, and standing alone on the edge of a vast ocean. Dawn arrived with a flurry of fresh complications. Tyrion informed her that a delegation from Dorne had arrived unexpectedly at the city gates, lesser nobles, not Prince Doran's kin, since that line was mostly gone, but a new alliance of Dornish houses wanting an audience. Arya quickly assembled a small welcome in the courtyard. The Dornish party entered with colorful robes and well-groomed horses, standing out starkly against the city's ash-stained backdrop. They were led by a tall woman with sharp dark eyes, who introduced herself as Lady Nymella of House Corgil. She bowed to Arya, albeit with a certain measured pride. "Your Grace, I bring greetings from the lords and ladies of Dorne. We have watched the recent turmoil from afar. Now that peace is on the horizon, we wish to discuss terms of trade and mutual recognition." Arya recalled that Dorne had often been fiercely independent, historically difficult for any crown to manage. "We are open to trade," she said, "though our resources are thin at the moment. The city is still rebuilding." Lady Nymella inclined her head. "We understand. Still, Dorne has surplus wine, olives, citrus. Your city might benefit. In return, we ask for a fair exchange of metals, perhaps iron or steel, once your mines and forges are operational. We also wish to confirm that the Crown want meddle in Dornish affairs if we sign a new accord." "Ness and I." Tyrion, standing beside Arya, murmured quietly. "Dorne likes to keep its autonomy. They're testing to see if you intend to tighten control over them." Arya eyed the Dornish party. "I have no desire to force Dorne's hand. You remain part of the realm, but I won't be sending armies into your deserts without reason. If you respect the Crown's rule in name, and pay a fair share of taxes once trade is flowing, we won't meddle in your internal governance." Lady Nymella appeared satisfied. She extended an invitation. "Then please, let us speak further. We have documents prepared, proposals that might speed your city's recovery. My lords wait in the tents outside the gate, if you'd allow them entry." Arya consulted Tyrion with a glance. He shrugged. "It's best we show hospitality. If they mean to help, it's worth hearing their proposals. Dorne's wealth could do wonders for our finances." So Arya granted them permission. The Dornish set up a handful of bright pavilions in a cleared section near the keep to avoid rubble. Servants carried crates of Dornish goods, fragrant wines, fresh lemons, small jars of potent spices. The city folk watched curiously, some uncertain whether to trust these visitors from the south. But soon enough, the aroma of citrus and the bright colors drew onlookers. Arya spent the better part of the day in negotiations with Lady Nymella and her companions. They hammered out a preliminary accord. Dorne would supply certain goods at discounted rates for a limited time, in exchange for a favorable trade route once the roads were secured. The Crown would not impose any new taxes on them for 3 years, allowing both sides to rebuild. By evening, they reached a tentative agreement. Lady Nymella offered a polite bow, though her dark eyes never lost that calculating edge. "You are not what I expected in a queen," she said. "Perhaps that bodes well for Westeros." Arya arched a brow. "What did you expect?" Nymella's lips curved faintly. "Another dragon queen, all fire and ambition. Or perhaps a puppet enthroned by the northern lords. But you're neither. You carry a quiet sense of purpose. Dorne respects that." Arya nodded, tired but somewhat gratified. "Thank you for your confidence. If you need anything more while you're here, speak with Tyrion or Davos." That night, the Dornish hosted a small gathering under their pavilions, offering cups of their spiced wine to anyone curious enough to visit. Arya did not attend. She had little taste for revelry when the city still mourned. Instead, she oversaw the distribution of the newly arrived grain, ensuring no corruption slithered into the lines. Tyrion and Davos took some wine to share as they moved through the crowd, perhaps hoping to lift spirits. Arya sipped water from a clay cup, her throat parched. She saw old men clutching meager sacks of barley, women guiding children who held stale bread, a hush of grim relief in the air. At least they weren't starving tonight. When the distribution ended, she took a final look around the courtyard. Lanterns flickered, and people bedded down wherever they could find space. She climbed a short flight of stairs to the keep's perimeter, scanning the city beyond. Torches glowed in pockets, but most districts were dark. The once resplendent King's Landing had become a patchwork of ruin and resilience. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what remained undone. To truly rebuild, they'd need years, maybe decades. She heard footsteps. Brienne approached, pausing a respectful distance away. "Your Grace, I wanted to inform you that our watch patrol found 3 cut purses in the southern quarter, stealing from the ration lines. They apprehended them without much trouble. Any instructions on how to handle them?" "Mentor." Arya sighed. "Cut purses probably tried to feed themselves. Lock them up for a night, make them do some menial labor in the city's cleanup. They can earn their bread by honest work. If they repeat the offense, we'll consider harsher measures." Brienne nodded, understanding. "Mercy, but with caution, as you say." Arya gazed out into the darkness. "Thank you, Sir Brienne. Go get some rest if you can. We'll need you fresh tomorrow." The tall knight gave a slight bow. "I'll do that, Your Grace." She retreated into the shadows, her armor clinking softly. Arya remained there a while longer, wondering if she'd ever truly rest. She finally made her way to her chamber. Exhaustion so thick she could barely undress before collapsing onto the crude pallet. Even in dreams, she was haunted by the countless faces she'd seen that day. The hungry, the hopeful, the calculating. She didn't know if she had the strength to guide them all, but she would not fail for lack of trying. Morning arrived with a bustle of fresh crises. Over the next days, letters flew in from the Westerlands, the Reach, the Riverlands, all seeking to solidify alliances or clarify new boundaries. Some had small feuds with neighboring lords. Others sought the crown's blessing on new roads or trade deals. Tyrion orchestrated it with deft skill, but Arya had final say on many issues, and the sheer volume left her dizzy at times. She listened, deliberated, and weighed the good of the realm above personal preference. Gendry quietly forged her crown, melting down old, twisted scraps of steel from the keep. He hammered and shaped them into a slender circlet, each blow echoing through the city's battered forges. Arya visited him once or twice during the process, watching sparks dance in the gloom. He said little, focusing on the craft. When at last he finished, he presented the circlet to her in the courtyard at dusk. The metal still faintly warm to the touch. It was simple, as she'd requested. No gemstones, just a smooth band of dark steel with a single stylized wolf's head etched at the front. She tested its weight in her hands, feeling the ridges from Gendry's hammer strokes. It felt like a blade turned into a circle, a reminder that authority was meant to protect, not to slaughter. She thanked him quietly, her expression solemn. The day of the coronation arrived sooner than she expected. In the days leading up to it, Tyrion had quietly invited the lords and notables who could reach King's Landing without too much peril. Some came eagerly, hoping to curry favor. Others arrived more reluctantly, uncertain about a Stark on the throne. But they came all the same, drawn by the chance to witness or influence the new shape of power. The chosen site was the courtyard of the Red Keep, partly because the old throne room was still half collapsed, and partly because the courtyard could accommodate more people. Workers cleared rubble, laid rough boards over cratered sections, and hung simple banners: the direwolf of House Stark, the stag of House Baratheon, the lion of House Lannister for Tyrion's presence, and other sigils of loyal lords. No Targaryen banner flew. That era, it seemed, had ended in fire and grief. When the day dawned, the city took on a tense air of anticipation. A hush lingered over the crowd that assembled, mingling in the courtyard's edges. Peasants, small folk, merchants, knights, any who wished to witness were allowed inside, albeit under watchful guards. Lords stood in a cluster near a makeshift dais, wearing finery salvaged or borrowed. Brienne, Davos, and Jon waited near the dais, each dressed in attire that was formal, but not excessively so. Tyrion fussed with a ledger, ensuring all was in order. Arya stood in a modest chamber nearby, wearing simple gray leathers with a faintly embroidered direwolf on her shoulder. She had the steel circlet on a small cushion by her side. She felt oddly detached, as though this was happening to someone else. Perhaps her younger self would have laughed at the notion of standing here, about to accept the crown of the 6 kingdoms, or run out the door. But she steadied her breathing, reminding herself of the reasons she was doing this. Not for glory, but for the people who needed stability. A steward appeared, bowed, and signaled it was time. She gave a small nod, picked up the circlet with both hands, and followed him out into the courtyard. An immediate hush fell as she stepped onto the rough boards that served as a dais. Tyrion stood waiting, a scroll in hand. On her other side, Davos, Jon, and Brienne watched with guarded pride. Beyond them, rows of lords in battered silks, and behind those, the mass of small folk in their threadbare cloaks. Tyrion began to speak, his voice carrying through the courtyard. He recounted the trials of the recent wars, the defeat of the Night King, the downfall of the Mad Queen, the destruction of King's Landing. He spoke of how the realm now stood poised to rebuild, but only if guided by someone who did not crave power for its own sake. He spoke of Arya Stark's deeds, her travels, her role in saving the realm from darkness. The words were more flowery than Arya liked, but she let him finish without interruption. When he was done, the hush deepened. He turned to her. "Arya of House Stark, do you accept the burden of ruling these 6 kingdoms, to protect the weak, to uphold justice, and to serve the realm before yourself?" She felt her pulse thudding in her ears. She wanted to say 1,000 things. Instead, she spoke calmly, voice carrying, "I accept, so long as the realm understands that no queen can rule alone. I will do my duty, but I expect all lords and people to uphold theirs in return." A murmur of uneasy agreement passed through the crowd. Tyrion nodded, stepping aside so she could face the assembly. She held the circlet in her hands, the steel catching the morning light. With a steadiness that surprised even her, she lifted it, placed it upon her head. The metal settled against her hair like a cool band of responsibility, forging a link between her and the realm. For a moment no one breathed. Then, in a single wave, the lords sank to their knees, one after another. The small folk bowed or knelt as well, some awkward, some sincere. Davos bent the knee, followed by Brienne, and at last Jon, though he did it with a haunted look, as if remembering the times he had bent the knee before. Tyrion bowed deeply, concluding his ceremony. Murmurs rose in the crowd, uncertain at first. Then a low chant began. "Long live the Queen." It was not the thunderous roar of an adoring populace, but it carried genuine relief and hope, mingled with caution. Arya gazed across the kneeling figures. She did not feel triumph. She felt the weight of 1,000 burdens settling onto her shoulders. But she stood resolute, the simple steel circlet pressing against her brow. She spoke over the rustle of voices. "Rise. I am no goddess. I'm just Arya Stark, who seeks to guide us out of darkness. Help me, and I'll help you. That is my vow." They rose, a ripple of movement. Some lords looked uncertain, others resolute. The small folk stared with wide eyes, some even smiling through tears. Beneath the dais, a boy clutched his mother's hand, gazing at Arya as though she were some figure from a song. She met his gaze, remembering her own innocence once. She hoped he would see better days ahead. The ceremony ended soon after, lacking grand feasts or parades. People dispersed to resume their lives, though they carried new stories of how the Wolf Queen was crowned in a plain courtyard, with a battered keep behind her. Lords came to pay respects, and she accepted them with the minimal courtesy required. By midday, the courtyard was a swirl of minor negotiations, newly declared loyalties, and quiet hope. When evening descended, she slipped away to the battlements, the steel circlet still in place. It felt strange. She reached up, running a finger along the etched wolf's head. The city spread below her, torches flickering in the twilight. Tyrion found her there, softly clearing his throat to announce his presence. "Congratulations, Your Grace," he said with a wry smile. "You're now officially burdened with the realm's troubles." She snorted. "As though I wasn't before." He nodded. "Yes, well, now it's formal." He stepped beside her, peering at the city lights. "They'll tell stories of this day, you know. How the one who never wanted power ended up wearing the crown. Might inspire a few souls." She folded her arms on the battlement, I'm not here to inspire. I'm here to protect them from more madness." She took in a slow breath of the cooling air. "Do you think it's enough? Or will the realm tear itself apart again?" Tyrion's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "We can't see the future, but you've given them hope. Sometimes, that's all people need to endure. Time will tell if we succeed or fail." And she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind brush her cheeks. "Thank you, Tyrion, for guiding me, for believing in something better." He smiled gently. "I'm only repaying a debt. I once believed in Daenerys for the same reason. I won't repeat my mistakes. This time, I chose carefully." They stood in companionable silence, the hush of the city below them. Arya stared at the distant horizon where the sea met the night sky. She thought of the promises she'd made, to feed the hungry, to quell the bandits, to rebuild the city. And beyond those tasks, she had to maintain peace among the lords, preserve alliances, ensure no new tyrant rose in her shadow. The path was steep and uncertain, but she carried on, a steel circlet resting lightly against her brow, reminding her at every moment that she had become the guardian of a realm scarred by war. She vowed not to add more scars if it could be helped. When Tyrion excused himself to retire, she stayed longer, letting the darkness settle around her. Distantly, she heard the calls of watchmen changing shifts, a faint echo of music from the Dornish pavilions outside the gate. The city breathed below, battered but alive. She placed a hand on the circlet's wolf etching, remembering every lesson her family had taught her about honor, mercy, and resilience. At last, she turned from the battlements, footsteps echoing on worn stones. The day was done, and a new age had begun, one she would shape with caution and resolve. She was Arya of House Stark, Queen of the Six Kingdoms, wearing a simple band of steel in a city that still smelled of ash. Yet within her glowed a fierce promise. She would lead them, protect them, and if one day she set this crown down, it would be because the realm no longer needed her to hold it. Until then, she would stand watch, a wolf among the ruins, guiding her people toward a future where no dragonfire or mad ambition could again lay them low. And that, she thought, was enough reason to bear any weight fate placed upon her.